Good evening. Since 6 p.m., the board has been in closed session to consider the following: the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, the sale or purchase of securities, investments, or investment contracts, and collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Donna Wanke,
Wait, actually, we need to call the roll for the actual vote.
Leong,
Aye.
Gerke, Aye. Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Yangroor,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are in open session. Good evening and welcome to the October 5th board meeting. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Now, please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Donna Wanke, Charles Kush, Christine Gerke, Joe Kuzminski, Paul Leong, and Janet Yangroor.
Okay, please join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this point we have reached the point in the agenda for good news.
Okay, since 1994, the world has celebrated on October 5th World Teachers Day. I'd just like to take a minute to thank our teachers and our educators for all the work that you're putting into supporting our students during this time. So I know it's a lot of work. You're putting a lot of effort into it. You're doing a great job. I want to say thank you and congratulations.
Congratulations indeed, and thank you from the Board of Education as well. All right, so at this point, we will move on to the point in the agenda for public comment. Okay. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public at its meetings. Citizens who wish to address the Board of Education should identify themselves by name and home address. Comments by individuals shall be limited to 3 minutes. If the individual is representing multiple individuals or a group, they shall be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. Issues raised in public comment will be taken under advisement by the Board of Education, but will not be discussed this evening. Issues raised during public participation may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff. The superintendent is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment and will apprise the board accordingly. At this point, I would like to welcome Paige Sawatsky. Good evening and welcome.
Hello, my name is Paige Sawatsky, and I am a senior at Naperville Central. I have been a student at Naperville 203 for 13 years, from kindergarten until now, and I've always been so proud to say that I go to school here. Our district is one of the best school districts in the country, and I always felt happy when talking to my friends and family about the opportunities available to me at school. I have been so grateful for the many unique opportunities and wide-ranging classes, extracurricular activities, and sports teams during my time in junior high and high school. I have taken advantage of Adventure Gym, intro to teaching, jewelry and medals, and even rock climbing club at Madison Junior High. I simply had access to opportunities that many others could only dream of. Then the pandemic struck, and more importantly, District 203 responded to it. I went from getting to kayak at school to watching videos from my bedroom about other people kayaking. It's not the same. For my intro to teaching class, I was set to intern at a 203 elementary school. How do you suppose that will work over Zoom? My youngest sister is taking honors chem as a freshman, and her lab work is rather different than mine was when I was in that class 3 years ago. Can there be any doubt how profoundly the high school experience has been negatively impacted by the pandemic response of this district? It doesn't need to be this way. I have friends from all over Illinois who are getting to return very soon or have already returned under a hybrid plan. For example, District 211, Palatine, begins hybrid October 26th. District 308, Oswego, begins October 19th. District 99, Downers Grove, and District 86 returned today. Not to mention that LaGrange, District 105, began hybrid on September 14th, and District 205, Elmhurst, started 2 weeks ago for underclassmen, and upperclassmen started back today. I've also always wondered why people would pay to go to Bennett when they have Naperville 203 schools available to them. I thought this seemed foolish, except now it doesn't seem so foolish because they've been hybrid the entire school year. Naperville used to be a role model to other districts. Now it stands alone, like a wrecked ship, serving as a solitary warning to others about what not to do. What used to be a source of pride to me has now been changed into nothing but disappointment. You might not understand this, but these years, each and every one of them, is so important to people my age. We don't get these years back. They are precious to us, and you hold them in your hands. What you choose to do or not to do will impact us as students for the rest of our lives. Naperville is capable of so much more. Please, fill that promise and let us return to school. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you, Paige, for coming. We always love to hear from students. At this point, I would like to call Adam Russo. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Is this on? There we go. I would say what she said, that she did a great job. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. To be clear, I'm speaking as a parent who happens to be a mental health professional and not the other way around. Today, high schoolers in their special period had to watch through Zoom a slideshow presentation about Zoom fatigue. How are you going to decrease the amount of Zoom fatigue without substantially decreasing Zoom requirements? It sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit. But that's the story now 6 months into COVID. Yesterday, I sat on a completely full plane, 300 people sitting elbow to elbow. Yes, the middle seats were full. 300 people can sit in close proximity to fly, but we can't get 20 kids in a classroom because there isn't enough distance. They can't both be simultaneously true. I say we can get 20 kids in a classroom if this board had the guts to do the right thing and not bow to emotional whims of wherever the pressure is coming from. We have to focus on data, not emotions. District 203 has received well-deserved merits and accolades for meeting the individual needs of the students over the years. Yet the district seems happy to have a one-size-fits-all approach with remote learning. Whose needs exactly are being met with this model? It's for sure not the needs of the kids. Kids and parents deserve to know what the plan is and why. I've heard of a vague plan, but there's definitely no clear timeline, which tremendously impacts parental planning. And there has certainly been no why. Virtually every data point suggests kids should be back in school immediately. School districts all over the country have reopened without catastrophic consequences. As mentioned earlier, even private schools in Illinois have opened. It can be done, and as a parent, we deserve to know why we're not choosing to. Why are you choosing to give our kids a substandard remote education when data from other states points to kids returning to in-person learning? Why are you choosing to harm their mental health by creating anxiety, depression, and hopelessness? Why are you supporting kids of all ages being socially isolated from their friends and from their classmates? And why does this have to be such a damn fight to get kids back in school? And the answer to that question cannot include, we don't want any kids to contract COVID, or it feels uncomfortable to staff. And I'll tell you why. To the first potential response of, we don't want any kids to contract COVID, believe me, neither do I. I also don't want kids to die in car accidents. Yet, 6,000 high school kids die in car accidents each year, and we still hand out driver's licenses. This year, far less kids will be affected by COVID than car accidents. Tell me, will we be prohibiting kids from driving to school, prohibit them from playing sports because of injury risk? If the answer is that yes, kids will be driving to school and playing sports, then the logic simply dictates that they attend school during COVID, full stop. To the second one of, it feels uncomfortable to staff. Millions of people have scrambled to make it work over the past 6 months, and most people didn't get to choose whether or not they felt comfortable. It's been a nightmare for all parents to figure out how to work under these conditions. So I'm not sure why teachers and other staff would feel like they should be exempted from the plight that so many have had to face. Secondly, there's near universal agreement on the importance of education for kids. Some would argue that it's essential to their development and future. If that's the case, then they need to step up and act like it. Either they are essential or they are not, and there are different consequences of choosing which side they fall on. The District 203 mission statement reads in part, develop complex thinkers and community contributors. Keeping kids in front of a screen simple will not develop either of these skills. Critical thinking and learning the leadership skills to be a community contributor cannot happen two-dimensionally. It happens with live people having live discussion, with live engagement, solving live problems with live impact. It's time to get the kids back to school. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Adam, on behalf of the whole board. All right, at this point, I would like to call Charles Stone.
Good evening.
Good evening and welcome.
Before I start my comments, I just want to say thank you to the senior in high school who did a wonderful job. And I want to thank you to everybody in this room whose eyes were locked onto that student and paid her the respect. The only person in this room that was staring at the computer their entire time was our superintendent, Dan Bridges. I want everybody who's watching at home to know that. I think it is so disrespectful, Dan. Anyway, I'll start my remarks. I watched the entire 3-hour board meeting from 2 weeks ago. I heard a lot of talk about metrics, equity and access, implicit bias training, reframing our thinking, and even systemic racism. The only thing I didn't hear was learning loss, higher dropout rates, lifetime earnings loss, single parents, childcare, depression, anxiety, suicides, or drug overdose deaths. I watched parents bravely stand up and with tears in their eyes, they begged you to reopen the schools. One mother broke down as she detailed how her child is emotionally and intellectually regressed over the past few months. We are in a public health crisis right now. Nobody disagrees with that. However, the lockdowns and the remote learning is making this public health crisis even worse. In DuPage County alone, suicides are up 23% in the first half of the year, and drug overdose deaths are up 53%. Experts say these figures will only increase as long as we continue to shut our students out of the school. The saddest part of this entire deal is that we've been in phase 4 since June 26. That's 101 days ago. That means that in-person has been allowed for the last 100 days. But not Naperville and District 203. Even the most liberal of communities in California and New York have reopened for in-person learning, but not Naperville and District 203. We apparently know better than the rest of the country. And to the 203 board members, thank you for your service, but my gosh, can we ask better questions of these bureaucrats? Maybe questions like, why are school districts across the country with substantially less resources able to return to the classrooms, but somehow we are not? Maybe ask them, what are the expected learning loss rates that we can expect in next year's testing due to remote learning? How much worse will the impact be on our minority and low-income students? And to the board member 2 weeks ago who addressed the community directly and said, I beg you to work with us and be patient. It's been exhausting for everybody to go through what we've gone through since March. I say to you, with respect, you have no idea what exhausting is. Go and share your complaint with the single mom that has no help and has to drop her kids off at the YMCA instead of a proper school classroom, then cries herself to sleep every night. Finally, I'd like to address the superintendent's personal comments from the end of the last board meeting, if he could show me the respect of eye contact. Mr. Bridges said, and I quote, "This pandemic, and by virtue in my position, I have put all of you, our educators, in a very difficult position." You're absolutely right, Dan. You have put our amazing teachers in a difficult position. However, Dan, you forgot to acknowledge the most important stakeholders in this entire equation, the students. We get it, Dan. You have 5 kids, 4 of them have gone through the system here. Everybody who's been in earshot of you has known that. You also have 1 currently enrolled senior. Everybody knows this. But with respect, Dan, having a senior in high school enrolled here is light years different than a single mom who has to drop her kid off at the YMCA and then goes and cries herself to sleep every night because she doesn't know the bills are going to be paid. 2 more seconds. You say this is personal to you. You say you're empathetic to the parents, Dan. Show us, don't tell us. Enough talk, enough surveys, enough bureaucracy. Get the kids back into the schools. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Charles. At this point, I would like to call Amy Vogelsong. Good
Good
evening.
evening. My name is Amy Vogelsang, and I am a teacher at Naperville North High School. I usually prefer to watch these meetings through the live stream, but I feel that my perspective has been severely underrepresented, and so I felt compelled to speak before you tonight. I am a member of this community who believes that the changes to Stage 2 of the Return to Learn 2.0 plan are not in the best interest of students, staff, or the community. Respectfully, we do need to look at the data. The data shows that COVID cases are not much better in Naperville than they were when we began the school year. Regarding that suicide statistic, none of those people were under 18, and while it is still a tragedy, it is not a result of students not being in school. It's not about teachers feeling uncomfortable, it's about them having to choose between the health and well-being of their families and earning a paycheck. We are about to lose some great educators. If you look at the 203 job boards, we are looking to fill positions across all departments and across all levels because teachers are being forced out of classrooms by these decisions. Furthermore, what is this sacrifice for? I think that the community has an image in their mind of what hybrid learning will look like that does not reflect the reality of our situation. Hybrid learning is not going to look like school did in February. It's not students congregating in the cafeteria at lunch. It's not students working in small groups with their peers. It's not teachers squatting down next to a desk to work through a problem with a student. It's this. It's speaking at a distance through masks. Collaborative work will still be facilitated through Chromebooks and probably via Zoom in the classroom. It will not look much different than it does currently, only students will not be in the comfort of their own homes. Furthermore, teachers will be double planning and trying to juggle students in the classroom, students who are sometimes in the classroom but are at home today, and students who are strictly online learners. This does not lead to improved learning outcomes for our students, nor will being back in school offer the opportunities for social growth that many parents hope it will. And if we are asking teachers, students, and community members to make these sacrifices, they need to know what for. So I just ask that we're very transparent about what hybrid learning will be, about the spread of COVID in this community, and where our values lie. People like to use our most vulnerable students, our English learners, our students with IEPs, as cudgels in this debate. But if we stick with the Stage 2 plan, we can serve them better while protecting their safety. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Amy. Okay, at this point, I would like to call Lauren Person. Good evening and welcome.
My name is Lauren Person. I have a second grade daughter with an IEP and a stepson in 7th grade. I'm speaking tonight to advocate to get our children in school with a thought-out plan. This is a choice that should have been offered since August. What have I done since our children were dismissed from school on March 13th? I have educated myself on this pandemic, read the guidelines, continued to have discussions with teachers, doctors, followed other district plans, listened to every board meeting, written letters, and spoken to some of you. Every day matters, every decision matters. Do you know how many days it has been since March 13th? 206 days. Monday through Friday, private school kids go to school, daycares are open and have pods in place if applicable, and neighboring districts have gotten their children seated in their classrooms for a full school day. And this is where we are. District 203 children are not seated in the classroom, yet there are children able to be in our school buildings for a program. What about our priority school students that were mentioned for phase 2 that were brought in for testing? That would be my daughter, and I've had no response back regarding that. Does that matter or affect your new plan? Meanwhile, our other children are asking, how much longer do we need to be at home doing this? Every day matters, every decision matters. Our children, and I know some teachers, are fed up, frustrated, and some mentally burnt out. Mentally burnt out because this current plan is not sustainable. Every day matters. I have parents asking, is anybody else having connection issues? A child just missed class. A child just missed minutes of their education. The teacher saying, can you please say that again? I can't hear you. Again, frustration, more education minutes missed. This has personally happened to us where I've looked over and I've seen my daughter cry. A teacher telling me, I don't have any more information than parents. I'm learning at the same time you are, or wait, at least hours before. This one's the best, and if it doesn't hit home to you, then there is something wrong. A child hasn't learned to read or is learning to read, but yet expected to read, type, and submit on their new iPad or Chromebook. Every day matters for every student. You have not been transparent for our teachers, our staff, and our parents. Every day matters. Our teachers and students matter, and they deserve consideration. Do you know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of saying to you, it is unacceptable that I'm going to wait for you to review and that you're going to be providing this realistic schedule that is supposed to be working with also those who have to work. 206 days, and this is where we are. Every detail in your plan matters. How much time needs to go by that our children continue to fall or fail behind? How many days do our children have to experience tears and frustration? We need to do more as a community. This board meeting should be filled with parents and teachers and speaking up. We need to make sure that we are provided specifics. Mr. Bridges and the board, I wish you knew exactly what a kindergartner through a senior in high school has experienced since you put this plan in place. I wish you took the last 206 days to work and reopen our schools. You need to remember that every day, every student, every teacher, and every minute does matter.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Lauren. At this point, I would like to call Scott Person. Good evening and welcome.
My name is Scott Person. I never thought I'd be speaking at a District 203 board meeting with so much disappointment. I was raised in Naperville and District 203. I was so proud to raise my two children here. Jackson's a 7th grader at Lincoln, Ellie's a 2nd grader at Prairie. I would like to thank you for lighting a fire within me that I didn't know existed. What you don't realize is the parents won't stop fighting for the health and safety of our children. I've spoken to you both, Dan Bridges and Kristen Fitzgerald. You're not listening. I have no issue with the teachers or principals in contact with my children at Lincoln and at Prairie. Jackson's blessed to have an amazing team of teachers at Lincoln. The work that Ellie's 2nd grade teacher and reading specialist team is doing is nothing short of remarkable. What she provides those students on a daily basis is inspiring. The environment is not sustainable for the teachers or students. I commend all the District 203 teachers. It not only isn't sustainable, but the education is not fulfilling my children's needs, and I know the needs of many other children. My daughter is being left behind and regressing. Again, not because of the lack of effort from the school or home, where we also have a private tutor, or her teacher, or her for that matter. She wants to learn and takes it seriously. When I've spoken to you, you've always thrown the principals and teachers under the bus. You'll say you'll reach out to the principal, who'll discuss with the teacher. This isn't because of them. The teachers are doing all they can. This is a leadership problem. This is on you, Dan Bridges. You chose not to put the hard work in this past spring or summer. The last board meeting, you mentioned the conversations you're starting to have to get the kids back in school. That's great to hear, Dan. The only problem is those conversations should have been in June. The last board meeting, someone on the board was asking for parents to have patience. That time has passed. It's October. I was patient in March, April, and May. This is my children's health and safety. This is my children's future. The time is up. Prove me wrong this evening that you know that you are doing what is best for the children of District 203, getting them back in school. All the kids, K through 12. Parents, the community, and our children want to know the specifics. We want to know how all of our kids are going to be taken into consideration. I don't want to hear about your phases, because your phases aren't a plan to get them back. I don't want to hear about this being unprecedented times. We get it. We live in it every day, and we've adjusted how we live. I don't want to hear how it's fluid. This is an excuse so you don't make the tough decisions. The decisions are tough. It's time to start making them. I don't want to hear the board, specifically you, Dan Bridges, how you're working hard this time. We're all working harder than ever. You have no idea how we live. You live in your little bubble with your guaranteed contract and pension. Start earning it. I'll end with this. As I said before, it's time to roll up your sleeves, get to work. Use your resources, the funds you have, the amazing staff to get our district back to being a leader in education. Prove me wrong that you know what you're doing, because at this point, I've lost all trust and respect for this board and you, Dan. This should be criminal with what you're doing to our community. This evening, I don't want to hear excuses because the other districts and private schools are in person successfully. This is America. What happened for us to get here is this isn't the country or school district I grew up in. What a mess this is.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Scott. All right, at this point, I'd like to call Rachel Simner. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm not here to talk about Return to Learn. I'm an outlier, I know. I am here today to ask the board to support Iasb Resolution 2 for safe gun storage. This resolution asks the association to advocate for legislation that strengthens child-safe gun storage laws in Illinois, requiring gun owners to store firearms, whether they are loaded or unloaded, in a securely locked container. If a person under the age of 18 is likely to gain access to the weapon without permission. Currently, Illinois' safe storage law only applies to children up to age 14. With the increasing instances of youth suicide and school shootings, we need stronger safe gun storage requirements that protect school-aged children. Earlier this year, one of my son's schoolmates at Kennedy died by suicide. My son is 12, she was 12. I had to discuss suicide with my 12-year-old son, which was very difficult. And that's another reason why I want you to work to prevent more suicides. Here are some statistics that I'd like you to consider. The rate of firearm suicide among young people has increased 56% in the past decade. 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households report having easy access to the guns in their homes. Over 80% of child firearm suicides involved a gun belonging to a family member. Young people have the fastest growing firearm suicide rate of any group over the last decade. 73 to 80% of school shooters obtain the gun or guns from their home or the homes of relatives or friends. 4.6 million American children live in homes with guns that are both loaded and unlocked. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Rachel. All right, at this point, I would like to call Jam Rivera. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, board, and thank you, administration, for letting me speak tonight. I am one of those people that believe our children should be in school right now. I believe there are safeguards and precautions that could have been taken over the last 6 months to do that. However, I'm not here to talk about that. There are the arguments on both sides, and I'm not going to sway that discussion. What I'm here to talk about is my daughter. My daughter's a senior at Naperville North. The quality of her education is severely lacking. I'm here to discuss the quality of the education she's getting. I want to, and hopefully to encourage you to take steps now to improve that quality. It's ridiculous, the kind of things that I'm seeing on the online meetings that cause her to get distracted and disengaged. And by the quality, I'm not talking about the Chromebooks and the access to the internet. I'm not talking about the connectivity and all that. I'm talking about the quality of the content, the quality of the materials that are being used. I'm talking about the quality of the practices and the methods that the teachers are using to teach. I'm not an industry practitioner. I don't know the education industry, but I am sure that there's a right way to do online learning. There is. And it differs significantly from the in-person learning that we've been doing for 20 years. Okay? Online learning, I would presume requires a different set of curriculums, a different set of materials, a different teaching style by the teachers doing the teaching to engage the students and interact with them in such a way that you can't do, you have to do differently online. These things take time to develop, and we've had 5 months. We had 5 months prior to September 1st to start developing these things. And I can't believe that not one of you even envisioned that this might be happening. For 5 months, I don't see any indication that there was any effort to convert our in-person curriculums and teaching styles to those that would be more effective online. If that did happen, then it happened with no transparency, and quite frankly, it happened very ineffectively. Okay, so what I'm asking the board to do right now, what I'm asking the board to do is 2 things. I'm asking the board, not because I prefer online education. I feel that online education is in our near future. I'm asking the board to do 2 things. I'm asking the board, 1, to better train and equip our teachers with the skills needed for online education. And those are completely different than the skills and teaching methods that they use in the classroom. We need them to have those skills. And 2, I'm asking you to help our teachers convert their in-person materials to online materials that they can use more effectively. With these 2 things, I believe we can get by with the online learning. And I'm asking you to do it immediately. Start these initiatives immediately. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Jan. I do not have any additional people on my list. Does anyone else in the audience wish to address the Board of Education? Okay. This will conclude our public comment period. As we finish our public comment period, however, I want to thank all of our participants on behalf of our whole board. We appreciate your advocacy for your children. I also want to acknowledge the many public comments submitted by email from many of our community members. We also appreciate your advocacy. I want to assure each public commenter, regardless of the format in which you have commented, your concerns have been heard by the Board of Education. I also want to take a moment to thank all of those who are emailing their thoughts and questions to the board. We read and review each email and do our best to respond to each email personally. At this point, there are some times when, due to the volume of email, we are not able to respond in a timely way to each one. However, each of these emails is read and considered and valued. We thank you for taking the time to keep us informed, and we consider you to be a vital part of the process of reflecting the views of our community. As a reminder to our public commenters, our designee to respond to public comment is our superintendent, and he will apprise the board accordingly. All right, at this point, I will go to action by consent. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. I think, did we have a member who wished to pull something from the agenda or no? Or do you just want to vote on the agenda?
This is Paul Leong, and I'd like to pull item 6.02 to be voted on separately.
Okay, so then the motion for the consent agenda, can we reword that?
I move to approve items 6.01 and 6.03 from the consent agenda.
Correct. Second. A motion, a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Leong,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Yangroor, Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So I will entertain a motion on item 6.02.
Wanke, I move to approve item 6.02 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong,
Nay.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Yangroor,
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. All right, so we'll move on to item 7, communications, superintendent staff school report.
Okay, if we could pull up the Return to Learn update and report and just begin on the title slide. I do have some prepared comments for an introduction. And I have said this many times already, and I will repeat it because I do think it bears repeating. The end of last school year and the beginning of this school year so far has not been what many of us had hoped for or wanted. I am confident that we all want our students and our staff to be back in our schools and our classrooms on a regular basis, doing what we do so well. Even though we may all agree on our hope to get back to full in-person instruction as soon as possible, I recognize there are many different opinions and perspectives about when it is safe to do so and when that time should come. We kicked off this year with the theme of 203 Unites. In uncertain, challenging times like we're facing, we are stronger together. We are better together. I do recognize the incredible load being lifted by so many of you to make this year work. And as a school system, we want our kids back in school. However, I have grown concerned about how we, as a community, are responding. The strength of this community is its ability to pull together, to work together to be the best. While I welcome and I'm open to criticism about our plan, about our decisions, and that is within your right, name calling, personal attacks against members of the Board of Education and Administration, personal attacks against me and my family do nothing to help us get kids back in school. This team and many team members not at this meeting tonight are working tirelessly to help us meet our goals. And you may disagree with our plans or think there's a better way to do it, but I can assure you our team is pouring its heart and soul into their work. We are a better community than to turn to name-calling, attacks, and finger-pointing. Let's focus on how we as a community can unite to move forward. And you ask, what can you do? Wear your masks, watch your distance, practice good hygiene, limit the size of social gatherings, especially among our high school students, and especially those things that are not essential. Remember that this virus has impacted families and that there are neighbors who are counting on you. Our ability to move forward with our plans to return to learn that we will be sharing with you tonight depend on a partnership that involves all of us, because that is what makes an exemplary school district. So this evening, our outcome and our goal is again to update the community and the Board of Education on our Return to Learn plan. While we continue to update and adjust our plan, our Return to Learn goals do remain consistent. As educators, we recognize the great need for students to get back to in-person learning. Therefore, we set 2 goals for our work. The first was to develop a plan that can be responsive to changes in safety and health needs created by the pandemic, but also focus on returning all students to in-person instruction. Additionally, we focused on returning all students to in-person instruction and creating academic and social-emotional conditions to promote their education. The guiding principles we developed early in the spring continue to guide our work. As always, our plans must continue to align and support our district mission, as that is what defines us. We also know that our plans need to align across levels, since many families have students in different buildings and at different levels across the district. All plans need to include academic and social emotional needs and promote equity for all students. The Illinois State Board of Education also has provided updated guidance regarding hours of instruction and learning each day. During the week of September 21, parents and guardians were invited to complete the Fall 2020 Return to Learn survey. An executive summary is provided in board docs. Our purpose was to understand perceptions around e-learning and technology resource access, instructional rigor and expectations, student engagement and motivation, access to instructional support and peer relationships. In addition to those primary goals, we sought input concerning willingness to send students to school for in-person instruction and use of district transportation. It should be noted that we sought a general sense of parent and guardian sentiment around these issues. Parents and guardians were asked to complete the survey for each of their students individually. When the survey window concluded, there were over 15,000 respondents. A process of data cleaning is provided within the executive summary. Essentially, we were able to identify areas of strength and challenge around e-learning, which will inform direction as we move forward. Very few concerns regarding access were indicated, and concerns regarding student-peer relationships were evident. Ultimately, approximately 7 out of 10 responses indicated a willingness to send students to school for in-person instruction. Additionally, of those eligible for district transportation, 63% are willing to use this resource. There are many variables that each individual district must take into consideration as they plan for returning students to in-person instruction and for moving education more toward normalcy. While all districts must follow the Health Department and Illinois State Board of Education guidelines, there are factors that impact each individual district or school's ability to transition to in-person learning. It is very hard to compare with neighboring districts as all have unique characteristics. Local research tells us that many of the surrounding districts are utilizing live lesson streaming technology and block schedule formats to help support learning. Factors such as district size and structure does impact the transition to in-person learning. Naperville 203 has about 16,000 students across early childhood through 12th grade levels and connections at 23 instructional sites. Other area districts may only have high school age students or fewer school sites they support. Transportation, lunchroom spaces, and the ability to source technology during this time creates additional logistics that play a part in the moving through stages of return to learn. However, even if all of these differ across schools in DuPage County, we are confident our plans for stage 2 and 3 are in alignment with state and local guidelines and what's happening in many other districts across the area. We continue to monitor, collaborate, and learn from and with our neighbors. As a reminder from our community, from our presentation in August, we have established a staged process for returning to full in-person learning. This slide serves as a reminder of that process. Also as a reminder, in order to evaluate our status every 6 weeks, we will be monitoring and reviewing both the health and operational metrics. For health metrics, we'll be monitoring the community spread across the county, as well as within District 203's community. The operational metrics will be monitoring our supply and ability to refill necessary personal protective equipment, as well as our ability to appropriately fill daily absences due to COVID-19 related illness and quarantining requirements. This evening, we will provide additional information on how we're monitoring the health and operation metrics. It is important to remember that this is an ever-evolving situation and adjustments may be necessary as we continue to learn more about the virus. The decision to move between stages is not based on any one metric alone, but is reflective of the specifics of how the numbers are coming together to create the big picture of how controlled the spread of the virus is within our community. Dr. Igo will now speak more about the metrics and information we review to guide our decision-making.
First, we're going to talk about and review the specifics that relate to the health metrics. The Illinois Department of Health and the DuPage County Health Department have developed a framework to help schools make decisions about when and how to shift between educational models by identifying the level of community spread and providing guidance on what CDC mitigation strategies apply. Weekly, the Health Department monitors key metrics such as the total number of cases per 100,000, the weekly positivity rate, or the youth county case trend. The chart on the slide identifies each metric that the county is monitoring, as well as describes the metrics that are necessary to be within each of the 3 categories: minimal, moderate, or substantial. Each week, the DuPage County Health Department reviews those metrics and makes an overall determination of the level of community spread. The overall level is determined by the highest category in which a single metric is met or exceeded. Prior to considering a shift to more in-person learning, all metrics should be under the identified threshold for a given level for at least 2 consecutive weeks. For example, in order to move from moderate to minimal, all indicators would need to fall into the minimal range for 2 consecutive weeks. The red circles identify the metrics for the week of September 13th through September 19th. The number of weekly cases at that point was 72 per 100,000, and the Illinois Department of Health designation for the county was orange at least once in the last 4 weeks, placing both of these metrics in the moderate range. The weekly positivity rate was 4.7%, and we had at least one neighboring county in the orange in the last 4 weeks, placing both of those into the minimal range. The highest category for any single indicator drives that overall designation. Since 2 indicators were in the moderate range, the overall designation for the county is moderate. Based on the county level of transmission, minimal, moderate, or substantial, we then look to see what level of activities and mitigation strategies are recommended by the CDC and the DuPage County Health Department. As the level of community spread increases, the level of risk activities decrease, and as the community spread decreases or reaches the minimal stage, the level of risk activities increase. The level of mitigation strategies within the moderate level can vary within the established range. So we have divided this category into 2, a low moderate and a high moderate designation, to allow us to fine-tune our decision-making process. To fully understand how the virus is impacting our community, we will also be reviewing the data that is representative of District 203 community. The community data will be used to determine if we fall into the low moderate or the high moderate range of the community transmission. The community data will include the number of new cases per 100,000 within the last 14 days and the positivity rate as a rolling 14-day average of all the zip codes within our school boundaries. The data will be gathered through the Surgical Outcomes and Quantity Improvement Center from Northwestern Medicine. It's important to note that the metrics will represent all students from within a zip code, even if only a portion of students within that zip code attend District 203 schools. For example, the health metrics will include the Lisle zip code of 60532, even though many students in that zip code do not attend our schools. When determining the return to learn plans, we will leverage both the DuPage County Health Department and the level of risk activities as we make decisions about the learning mode. Currently, the DuPage County has made a determination that there is a moderate level of community spread. We then review the data specific to our community to determine whether we are in the low or high range of the moderate category. Within our district boundaries, the number of new cases per 100,000 is 59.8, which indicates a low moderate level of spread, and a positivity rate of 3.29%, which indicates a minimal level of spread. As with the DuPage County Health Departments, the overall level of risk activities and mitigation strategies is determined by the highest category in which a single metric is met or exceeded. Since the number of new cases falls within the low-moderate category, we should only implement moderate risk activities. COVID-19 mainly spreads from person to person through the release of respiratory droplets when an infected person talks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land into the mouth or nose of individuals that are nearby. Person interacts with different people, and the longer and closer the interaction, the higher the risk that the virus spreads. So it's important that the mitigation strategies focus on reducing the number of people an individual comes into contact with across the school day. We do this by limiting the number of students within a cohort and increasing or decreasing the amount of time groups of students mix throughout the school day. If you look at the listed activities under the mitigation strategies for minimal transition, you'll see that the student cohort can engage in some mixing of groups, which is considered a higher risk activity by the CDC. And when you review the mitigation strategies in the high moderate category, you will see that students must remain in static groups at all times, which is considered to be a minimal risk activity. It's important that we review the difference in the allowable activities between the low moderate and high moderate categories. When we are experiencing a high moderate level of community spread, students should remain static at all times, which is something that can be done in EC and elementary school, but is more difficult at the secondary level, which means that in-person instruction will look different between elementary and secondary when we are experiencing a moderate level of community transmission. While the health metrics are extremely important, we also need to make sure that we have what we need to operationally to support students when they attend in-person instruction. The two areas we are monitoring is our ability to maintain and refill the necessary PPE and our ability to fill the daily staff absences due to illness or COVID-19 quarantine requirements. We currently have several months of PPE in stock based on what we estimate we will use on a day-to-day basis. Many of the items that were difficult to get in April, such as hand sanitizers and masks, are now widely available, and we do not have concerns about replenishing these items. We are closely watching how many N95 and KN95 masks are used on a daily basis. These are medical-grade masks that our nurses and custodians will be using when caring for someone with symptoms or cleaning an area where an infected individual may have been in the school. These are more difficult to obtain and could become in short supply if cases increase across the country, as suppliers will likely prioritize sending these supplies to medical facilities if there is an increase in hospitalizations around the country. As more students return for in-person instruction and we get a better understanding of our actual daily use, we may need to make adjustments to how we measure this metric. We will also be closely monitoring our daily absences and our ability to fill both our certified and non-certified positions. While there are many unknowns related to the pandemic, one thing that we are confident about is that we will have positive cases within our school community. We will need to work as a community to help mitigate the risk of the virus spreading. One of the most important things we can do is to be sure to stay home if we are experiencing any symptoms or if we've had close contact with an individual that has tested positive. The chart on this slide identifies the number of positive cases that have been reported in the last 14 days, as well as the number of students and staff that are currently quarantined due to a close contact with an individual or a household member who's being evaluated for COVID-19. It's important to note that the quarantine number reflects the total number of people who have been quarantining in the last 14 days for any reason at all. They are all not necessarily related to contact within our schools. All families and staff are required to complete a daily symptom check to ensure that they are not experiencing any symptoms prior to arriving at school or work. If a student is experiencing symptoms, an email must be sent to the school nurse clearly identifying the symptoms that they are experiencing. Prior to returning to school, students will need to meet the Illinois Department of Health established criteria, which I will review in the next few slides. As an added precaution, we will be taking temperatures as students arrive at school each day. Any student that displays a temperature during this process will be sent to the health office for further evaluation. Should the student have a fever over 100.4, they will be required to go home. In addition to daily symptom monitoring and temperature checks, we also need to strictly adhere to the other 5 key mitigation strategies: consistently and correctly wearing a face covering, maintaining 6 feet of distance whenever possible, practicing good hygiene habits, providing additional cleaning and disinfecting of frequently touched areas, and conducting careful contact tracing whenever an infected individual has been in our school. All buildings have been provided with health and safety guidelines by level that outlines how to apply these key concepts throughout all areas of the building, including during student arrival and departure. To help families see how we will be applying the health and safety guidelines, we have created videos that demonstrate how we are maintaining a healthy environment within our school. They will be available on our district website by the end of the week. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, families should expect that students will be sent home more frequently this school year than they have been in the past. As you already know, the list of COVID-19 symptoms is long and are common in many other illnesses. We are required by the Illinois Department of Health to exclude any student who is experiencing one or more of the COVID symptoms unless we have with an alternate diagnosis from a physician or a negative COVID-19 test. If a student displays symptoms at school, they will be immediately sent to the school nurse and guardians will be called to pick them up. Since we are required to treat any individual with symptoms as a possible case, the student may not return until they meet the established criteria. As an example, a student may experience congestion or a runny nose while at school. Based on the guidance from the Illinois Department of Health, the student would be required to go home and would not be able to return until they had a negative COVID-19 test, an alternate diagnosis, such as a sinus infection, or they had remained home for 10 days and the symptoms had improved. We have had many questions about how we will be responding when we have a positive case reported. The local health department does not provide us with any information related to individuals who have tested positive or who have a probable diagnosis of COVID. Therefore, it is very important that the family shares this information with the health office as soon as possible. Once the school nurse has been notified, they will contact the family to do an inquiry into when the last time was the student was in our buildings, where they were within the building, and to identify any close contacts. The school nurse will also review the student's schedule and any seating charts to see if there are any additional areas with which we need to consider. Once that information is gathered, the locations where the student has been in the building will be closed and will undergo a deep cleaning process. The DuPage County Health Department will be notified. Any individual that was in close contact, which is defined as less than 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes, will receive a phone call from the health office informing them of the contact and the need to quarantine for 14 days. Following the phone call, the family will be provided with a letter via email that outlines the requirements and the steps necessary to return to school. For anyone who has a limited contact, defined as within the same indoor location for a prolonged period of time, typically all students who had been in the classroom with a student, families will be provided with a letter via email informing them of the low-risk exposure and be asked to closely monitor for symptoms. These individuals will not need to quarantine. Any student health information that is reported to us always remains confidential. When informing others of the exposure, no student names or circumstances are ever provided. For staff, the situation is very similar. Staff members report to their direct supervisor and to Human Resources if they have experienced COVID-like symptoms. If they have had contact with someone who has tested positive or if they have tested positive themselves, a member of our Human Resources team then speaks with each employee to ensure that we put in place a proper response. We know that COVID-19 spreads mainly from person to person, and as we continue to strive for the healthiest environment for everyone, it's extremely important that students follow those guidelines, especially those related to exclusion. This chart outlines our return to school protocols as they relate to a variety of COVID-19 circumstances. In addition to the scenarios I've previously discussed, I also want to draw your attention to the scenario that whenever someone in a household is being evaluated for COVID-19, all members of that household are required to quarantine while we're awaiting the results. This means that if a parent is currently under evaluation, all children or students within that household should quarantine until they have results from the test. Should your student find themselves in any one of these categories, you will be provided with a letter related to your specific circumstances that outlines the requirements for returning to school. Jane Willard, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, will walk us through the key outcomes for Stage 2.
As stated at the August 3rd board meeting, our goal after the first 6 weeks of school is to transition into Stage 2 of our Return to Learn plan, where we will increase in-person learning for students. We are excited to present our Stage 2 plans for each level on the following slides. We are encouraged by our health metrics, our staff and community excitement for increased in-person learning, and are ready to welcome more students in person during this stage. Our goals during Stage 2 remain focused on the social and emotional well-being of students, rigorous teaching and learning, meaningful student engagement and support, transitioning students into the building safely while practicing and implementing health and safety protocols, and to ensure that each student who chooses has the opportunity to engage in in-person learning during Stage 2. Before we discuss the specifics of Stage 2 learning models and transitions, I would like to begin by reviewing the 2 learning models that students are engaging in during Stage 1, 2, and will be in Stage 3. Synchronous learning is when there is a scheduled time for the teacher and students to meet either virtually or in person, and instruction is delivered in real time. In this structure, students have the opportunity to participate in discussions, ask questions, and work in small groups with their whole class and teacher being present. Asynchronous learning is when students are working independently at their own pace and time. Learning takes place by accessing information virtually, but does not require live or simultaneous interaction with a teacher or classmate. These terms will be referenced tonight as we explain the details of our Stage 2 learning plan. As we increase in-person instruction during Stage 2, we will leverage a hybrid and online-only learning model. While 2 learning groups, hybrid and online only, there will be instruction happening for both of these groups throughout the day or week at the same time. Beginning with early childhood and elementary first, students will attend in-person synchronous instruction with their teacher and peers, while the online-only students engage in real-time, live-streamed instruction at home. All students will have a blend of synchronous instruction led by the teacher and asynchronous work that will be assigned and completed at the time and pace of student choice. We will explain each hybrid model by level as we progress through our presentation this evening. Students and families will continue to have the option to keep their learning fully online through Stage 3. The online-only learning group allows for students to keep their current class schedule and remain in class with the teacher they started the school year with, keeping consistency for students and families. There is no longer a need for an online academy since we will have live stream technology available in the classroom for students. This slide provides an overview of the Stage 2 actions at each level. We will begin by increasing in-person learning for our youngest learners. As stated, early childhood and elementary students will begin to transition into the building for consistent, everyday in-person learning in the next few weeks. Students will participate in a balance of live, synchronous, and asynchronous learning each day. Mr. Freund will provide greater detail about the specifics later on in the presentation. At the junior high and high school levels, we will begin by transitioning to an e-learning block schedule for all students and will begin bringing students into the building for targeted supports, performance-based hand-on activities, and small group instruction. Monday will be a remote learning day for all students, where students will engage in synchronous and asynchronous instruction. As we transition to the latter part of Stage 2, every student will have the opportunity to attend in-person learning with their teachers and understand the health and safety guidelines to prepare for Stage 3 learning. The live stream technology is the backbone of our Stage 2 and Stage 3 learning models. This technology allows for students to engage with their current teacher, current classroom, and current curriculum without making changes to their schedules. The technology also allows for us to move from Stage 1, 2, or 3 learning models in a fluid manner. Students who elect online only will live stream into their classroom during synchronous time and will also engage in asynchronous learning throughout the day. Teachers will communicate with all students when live instruction will occur. We are currently in the process of setting up our early childhood and elementary classrooms first, and will transition the junior high and high school teachers and classrooms as we increase in-person instruction. We have conducted demos at each level in partnership with our educators and have created professional learning for our teachers so they are ready for this type of technology-dependent instruction. The October 12th Remote Planning Day will be devoted to preparing for live stream instruction, planning for the new schedules, and welcoming students into our buildings.
Good evening. This is Chuck Freund, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary. I'm going to now walk through early childhood and elementary transition. Planning for Stage 2 has been ongoing since last spring. While we have developed, modified, and shared various schedules over the past few months, our focus has remained on returning students to in-person learning. The stage we are currently in puts a premium on health and safety as we transitioned our students and staff back into schools. In Stage 2, we are prioritizing in-person learning for our youngest learners, but must keep health and safety as a top priority as well. Based on the metrics we've shared earlier tonight and in alignment with guidance from local and state agencies, we are preparing for a half-day model with in-person and online-only learning options for our early childhood and elementary students in Stage 2. Splitting our students into smaller cohort groups is necessary to maintain social distancing in school within our physical classroom spaces. The half-day option will also provide the necessary time to disinfect classrooms and for students to receive direct instruction from their classroom teacher 5 days per week. District 203 believes that in-person teaching and learning is the most effective model. It provides interaction between teacher and student, as well as student to student, that simply cannot be matched in an online environment for this age of learner in particular. Having students physically in their classrooms with their teacher enhances opportunities for child development socially, emotionally, and academically, as educators can assess more effectively and respond instructionally. As described earlier, we are able to provide access to classroom instruction simultaneously for those families who wish to continue their student online only. Let's take a look at the transition schedule for our early childhood students first. Beginning on October 19, we will implement a new schedule which continues with e-learning for all students each Monday. Then on October 20th, we will begin welcoming back early childhood students to in-person learning on a staggered basis. Each AM and each PM class will be divided in half. Each of these smaller cohorts will have the opportunity to return in person with an alternating day schedule for the first few weeks. One half of each class will come to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, while the other half of each class will come to school on Wednesdays and Fridays. This alternating day schedule will continue through November 6th. The following week, we plan to end the alternating day schedule and return all early childhood students to their classrooms together. The purpose for implementing this alternating day schedule for early childhood is to ensure our 3- and 4-year-olds have the time and support necessary to acclimate to a school environment where social distancing, face masks, and frequent hand washing will be the norm. Teaching these skills in a new environment takes time, and the safety of our students and staff must remain as a top priority. This next slide outlines the daily schedule for our early childhood students who are currently enrolled in the half-day program. Our half-day early childhood students will remain in the AM or PM session they are already assigned. On Mondays, half-day early childhood students in AM classes would meet with their teacher virtually from 8:30 to 9:30, and then teachers would provide 90 minutes of learning activities for students to complete in a self-paced manner outside of the time with their teacher. That's that asynchronous instruction that Mrs. Willard referred to earlier. PM students will meet with their teacher for an hour from 12:15 to 1:15 p.m. They too will have 90 minutes of learning activities provided that will be self-paced. And those families that elect to send their student back to Ann Reed in person will do so following the regular times for the half-day program. Tuesday to Friday, students will attend from 8:30 to 11 o'clock for the AM session and 12:15 to 2:45 for the PM session. As a reminder, we'll use that alternating day schedule from October 20 to November 6. Families that choose the online-only option for the half-day early childhood program will follow that same schedule. However, they could be assigned to a new teacher because grouping early childhood students by learning option would be most effective for supporting our youngest learners. The next slide shows a sample schedule to provide how a school day may look through the eyes of an early childhood student or parent. This particular sample would be for an AM student enrolled in the half-day program. It represents the school day in stage 2 for students who are attending in person or online only. Remember, they both have the same schedule. Students attending online only would obviously not be present for arrival or dismissal, but the rest of the day would be similar. At the early childhood level, we also have a number of students currently enrolled in a full-day program. These families will also have the option of in-person or online-only learning models. On Mondays, full-day students would attend virtually with an early childhood teacher from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. The teacher would provide an additional 2.5 hours of learning activities for students to work on in a self-paced manner. Then, on Tuesdays through Fridays, students who are returning in person will attend school from 8:30 to noon with an additional 90 minutes of learning activities provided for self-paced learning throughout the afternoon or evening. Again, we will use an alternating day schedule from October 20th to November 6th. And families that choose the online-only option for the full-day early childhood program would follow that same schedule. However, they may be assigned to a new teacher, similar to the half-day students, because grouping early childhood students in these models it would be more effective for supporting them as 3- and 4-year-olds. For elementary students, we will also begin a new AM/PM half-day schedule starting on Monday, October 19th. As this timeline shows, Mondays will be designated as e-learning days for all elementary students. Monday e-learning days will continue throughout stage 2. Elementary families will have the choice of an in-person option or an online-only option, just like our early childhood families. Beginning on Tuesday, October 20th, kindergarten students who will attend in person would return to school for a half-day in the morning or in the afternoon. Then, on each subsequent day, another grade level of students return, culminating with our 5th graders on October 28th. All elementary students remain with their current class, whether they are participating in person or online only. Staggering those starting days by grade level was done to ensure we provide each grade level of students with the time and support necessary to acclimate to a school environment where social distancing, face masks, and frequent hand washing is now going to be the norm. The next slide shows the daily schedule for our elementary learners. Beginning on Monday, October 19th, again, all elementary students would meet with their teacher virtually from 8:15 to 10:45. This includes the entire class. So those would be the AM students, the PM students, and all the students that are in the online-only option as well. This opportunity to stay together as a class once per week is an important element to maintaining peer relationships. On Mondays, students will also have 2.5 hours of learning activities to complete outside of their time with the teacher. Most of these activities will be asynchronous or self-paced. And then Tuesday through Friday, students who will return in person will attend school in the AM session, which shows from 8:15 till 10:45, or the PM session, which is shown as 12 o'clock noon to 2:30. Students will be assigned to AM or PM sessions by the building principal, but not based on last name as our hybrid plan showed back in July. For stage 2, principals will need to create these assignments to AM or PM based on students who might need busing, students who attend childcare at one of our many elementary sites through YMCA or Champions, strategic grouping for academics or social emotional support, and many other factors. Along with their choice of in-person or online only, we will be asking elementary parents to inform us of their specific intentions regarding busing and on-site childcare this week so that schools can determine AM and PM assignments by the middle of next week. As mentioned, families also have the option of having their student attend online only. These students will follow the same schedule as their in-person classmates. They will continue with their same classroom, and as Mrs. Willard described earlier this evening, access the classroom instruction via live stream. These students will likely be grouped by class in the AM or the PM. The next couple slides that I have for you in board docs break down the elementary schedule by minutes. So this slide here shows whether a student is attending in person or online only, that the focus of their time when with their classroom teacher will be English language arts, math, and social emotional learning. So that's that 8:15 to 10:45 or 12 to 2:45 or 12 to 2:30 time. You will also notice that some of their 2.5 hours together will include movement breaks for all or mask breaks for students who are attending in person. This slide also illustrates the type of learning within each of those priority areas. I'd like to point out that the entire time will include live instruction from the classroom teacher for all students, along with opportunities for independent practice, which is very typical for elementary classrooms. And as required by the Illinois State Board of Education, an additional 2.5 hours of learning will be provided outside of the 2.5 hours an elementary student attends with their classroom teacher for that total of 5 hours that Mr. Bridges mentioned earlier this evening. As shown on this slide, this additional 2.5 hours is a blend of independent learning, asynchronous or self-paced learning, and synchronous or live instruction. While the time with the teacher will focus on English language arts and math, this part of the elementary day will include application and practice of skills in reading, writing, math, and SEL. And as this chart shows, scheduled lessons will also occur throughout the week with the art teacher, the music teacher, the PE teacher, and the Learning Commons teacher, with additional activities provided for students on the days that they do not meet with those teachers. Coordinating all of this to ensure learning remains connected, meaningful, and supported can be complex. Our educators need the time to collaborate and plan in teams. This is another reason we have designed the weekly schedule with Mondays as an e-learning day for all students in the morning, as it also provides essential collaboration time for educators in the afternoon. To highlight the elementary day one step further, this sample schedule on the next slide is provided to illustrate how a school day may look through an elementary student's eyes. I want to emphasize this is only a sample. This particular schedule shows a student assigned to the PM session. The chart on the right, which is shaded in blue, illustrates how an afternoon may be allocated with a focus on SEL, literacy, and math. Students attending online only would obviously not experience those arrival or dismissal times, but the rest would be consistent. The chart on the left demonstrates how the morning would unfold for a student assigned to the PM session. Notice there may be only 1 or 2 scheduled lessons. This one happens to show PE live with the PE teacher, while the other activities are shown with a number of minutes. These are self-paced, asynchronous learning activities that could flex to really any time of the day, even after 2:30 in the evening, if that is supportive of the family schedule. These learning activities will be assigned at an independent level, knowing the classroom teacher will not be available for support as he or she is teaching the AM cohort of students while the PM students are completing their asynchronous learning. This is another reason we are implementing a daily half-day schedule so students can be set up for success ahead of their asynchronous time and or receive support no later than the very next school day. As always, parents would be encouraged to reach out to their student's teacher if they observe any struggle with those assignments that are put out by the teacher. Now I'll turn the presentation back to Mrs. Willard, who will introduce Stage 2 outcomes for junior high and high school.
As we move into Stage 2 at the junior high and high school levels, each building will increase in-person learning with the goal of inviting every student into the building during this stage. Each school has developed a process for providing targeted support for students who need extra help, who are experiencing connectivity issues, that need to engage in project-based learning in labs, or are having a hard time engaging in e-learning. All junior high and high school students will transition to a block schedule, Tuesday through Friday, where they will attend less periods a day for an extended amount of time. Mondays will be an e-learning day for students where they will engage in asynchronous and some synchronous learning for their classes. During this stage, the actions will be to implement e-learning every Monday, install live stream technology in all classrooms, implement a block schedule with A and B days to allow for longer instructional periods, create a process to facilitate targeted in-person opportunities for interventions and hands-on learning, and to practice health and safety protocols and familiarize students to these processes as we transition to Stage 3. Block scheduling is a learning model where students attend half their schedule every day for an extended period of time. During the block, the majority of the learning is done in a synchronous model of instruction with some asynchronous time to allow for small group, targeted instruction, and student collaboration time. Block scheduling allows educators to better respond to students' mental, physical, and emotional health, including workload and time on screen. By expanding the class period, teachers can better serve each population, moving purposefully within synchronous and asynchronous structures. Students can learn deeply, focusing attention on a smaller scope of subjects at a time. The block schedule allows students to learn at a reasonable pace in a face-to-face and in an online environment. Block scheduling continues to align with the Illinois State Board of Education curricular guidance and allows full access to the essential standards for each course. Block scheduling is not a new learning model in the area of education. Once we are in the building with 50% of our students, block scheduling reduces the potential health and safety concerns of students eating lunch in the building, and it allows for fewer passing periods, reducing the potential for close contact between students during unstructured times. It is important to note that students will engage in a block schedule Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The start and end times during these days are also different due to the need to transport all of our students to and from school following a condensed schedule once we move into the latter part of Stage 2, when 25% of our students will be in the buildings daily. Mrs. Posey, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, will explain the specifics of the block schedules at each level and the timeline and details for Stage 2 learning.
I'd like to walk you through the planned timeline for grades 6 through 12 and how they progress towards Stage 3. Across the district, October 12th will be a remote planning day for all staff, providing time for them to collaborate on the implementation of Stage 2 and how to best support students as we transition to in-person learning. The week of October 19th, we begin the new block schedule on Tuesday through Friday in all secondary schools, which will be completed virtually through our e-learning systems. Mondays at the secondary level will follow the 8 or 9 period day through an e-learning format. Staff will have the flexibility to provide synchronous and in-person instruction on Mondays based on student and course needs. During the week of October 19th, we will also begin to provide identified students with targeted instruction and support or enrichment in specific courses through in-person instruction. These recommendations for additional support will come from PLC teams and student service assessments based on academic and social-emotional needs. Data points for targeted support will include students who lacked engagement last spring or this fall, are failing to master standards in their courses, or who are not attending classes at an acceptable level. On approximately November 9th, both the junior high and high schools will increase the number of students receiving in-person instruction and support. The junior high schools will concentrate on transitioning students back to the building to understand the health protocols, acclimate to these new processes, and interact with student and peers in person on a gradual basis, allowing all students to participate in transition and in-person learning. The high schools will focus on bringing students into the buildings for courses that may be more difficult to provide instruction through e-learning and to provide intervention and extension for identified students. The increase in students will allow for all students to transition back to the building to regain familiarity, acclimate to the new protocols, and access resources. When we enter Stage 3, both levels will continue the Tuesday through Friday block schedule, utilizing an A-B rotation based on an alpha split, but also assigned by the principal for balancing class size purposes. Monday will continue to be an asynchronous, synchronous e-learning day for all students. The block schedule model supports the health and safety guidelines outlined by Dr. Igo to limit the passing periods and mixing of students each day. Now let's talk about the specifics for the junior high Stage 2 schedule. As previously outlined, Stage 2 will begin with an e-learning day each Monday that follows a traditional 1 through 9 period day from 8 a.m. to 2:50 p.m., which could include both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Staff who need to invite students to in-person learning have the flexibility to do so as it aligns to the Monday schedule. Tuesday through Friday, all students will begin attending this block schedule virtually, 4 class period blocks each day, beginning at 8:35 and ending at 12:50. Office hours for targeted student support are built into the end of each day. The gradual implementation acclimates students and families to the new times and routines and promotes autonomy for teachers with the planning and delivery of synchronous and asynchronous activities. Throughout Stage 2, students will be scheduled for in-person learning to implement a transition back to the building by grade level, allowing students to become familiar with the health and safety guidelines, build relationships with staff and peers, and experience in-person instruction in each and every class. After the students' assigned lunch period, students resume working on asynchronous activities assigned by their teachers. They may receive additional support as needed and finish their school day at 2:50. The specifics of the high school Stage 2 schedule. As noted, Stage 2 will begin with an e-learning day each Monday that follows the traditional late start 1 through 8 period day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. During the Monday schedule, staff members have the flexibility to invite students to synchronous instruction, including in person for those students or classes that may need intervention or extension. Tuesday through Friday, all students will attend the block schedule virtually, 4 class period blocks each day. Office hours for student support and collaboration are also built into the end of the high school day. As with the junior high schedule, we will gradually increase the number of high school students accessing the building for in-person learning, prioritizing those classes that have hands-on lab-type classes or performance activities, those needing access to specific resources or demonstrations, or students who are simply struggling with the e-learning structure. Students at the high school will be offered grab-and-go meals at both the beginning and the end of the day as needed. For both junior high and high school students who are choosing to remain fully in our online structure, they will continue following the block schedule via live streaming up to and through Stage 3.
Students enrolled in our Connections program will participate in an alternating day hybrid model when we enter into Stage 2. Students are currently receiving instruction in 5 cohorts. Those 5 cohorts will be reallocated into 2 groups, an A and a B group. In order to reduce the number of student groups that will be mixing during the day, students will remain in a designated classroom and staff will rotate between classrooms. Student schedules will remain the same as we transition into Stage 2, creating as much consistency as possible for students. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the A group will attend in person from 8:30 to 11:15, and the B group will attend in person from 12:15 to 2:30. On Thursday and Friday, the B groups will attend periods 1 and 2 in the morning, and the A groups will attend in person for periods 3 and 4. The groups will alternate mornings and afternoons every other Monday. While students are participating in e-learning at home, they will be able to live stream into all of their classes for synchronous instruction. This schedule allows all students to receive in-person instruction each day of the week, provides students with in-person instruction across all of their courses, while also ensuring that social distance can be maintained to the greatest extent possible. With half the students in person at a time, each class group will be able to learn in their own classroom space, while still allowing additional space within our schools for small groups, breakout rooms, and independent work. For the time being, all Connections coursework will be taking place either online or in person at the Connections site, as community-based instruction is not currently recommended. As we continue to monitor the health metrics, we will be looking for ways to reinstate this portion of our program. Students will continue to receive their IEP or 504 services regardless of the stage of the Return to Learn plan. As we move into Stage 2, teams will review student progress and make decisions about when and how to provide those services. Whenever possible, teams will prioritize providing services during those self-paced activities, but there may be times when it is best for a student to receive services during in-person instruction. Additionally, there may be times when a student will be asked to attend outside of their scheduled in-person instruction time so that they also may receive in-person instruction for their services. For our EL students at the elementary level, the EL teacher will collaborate with our general education teachers in order to provide support within the classroom during in-person instruction. However, there may be times when a student requires additional support outside the classroom, and this will occur during the e-learning portion of the day. Junior high and high school students will continue to receive their services within their scheduled classes. Students in the dual language program will continue with their current classroom teacher and will continue to implement the district curriculum following the language allocation plan to the greatest extent possible. Our students with IEPs who are served in our specialized classrooms will continue to be prioritized for in-person instruction. If health and operational metrics allow, students will enter Stage 3 the week of November 9th and participate in in-person instruction Tuesday through Friday. Specialized students will continue to receive daily self-paced learning activities. In order to prepare our students for this transition, during the first 3 weeks of Stage 2, students will participate in an alternating day hybrid, with students in each group receiving 2 days of in-person instruction and 3 days of e-learning, with the ability to live stream into the classroom for synchronous instruction. During this 3-week transition period, in addition to academic activities, educators will focus instruction on supporting students with following the health and safety guidelines, reinforcing mask distancing. It's important to slowly transition back to learning with small groups of students to ensure we are adhering to those health and safety guidelines, as during Stage 1, students have had minimal interaction with other peers. All students will continue to engage in e-learning on Mondays. I think it's important to maintain this routine in place, building our students' independence in case we need to revert back to Stage 1 due to the health metrics.
We are continuing to partner with the YMCA and Champions to provide childcare at our elementary schools, which I mentioned earlier this evening. Schools which service as childcare sites could continue to do so into Stage 2. However, we're expecting enrollment to open up here for Stage 2 as we change our schedules looking ahead, and that enrollment will determine which sites we would have childcare at and which ones would be needed. We do know that with students returning to in-person instruction, our sites may be more limited than they've been in Stage 1 for childcare capacity. So we will certainly watch enrollment very carefully. I'm in touch with YMCA and Champions on a very regular basis so that we can make sure we're accommodating as many families as we possibly can, looking at the childcare needs of those families. So families can expect to see the childcare registration information for YMCA and Champions on our website in the Return to Learn section tomorrow morning. And then also a quick update on food services. The USDA has provided an extension. Many of our families are already aware of this on the provision for emergency meal services through the end of the calendar year. Our food services vendor, Aramark, will continue to provide free meals to any child 18 years of age and younger, and would continue to provide that updated information regarding pickup times as well as locations on our district website.
The community will continue to be updated about our Return to Learn plan via our Talk 203 system, social media outlets, as well as website updates at naperville203.org/return to learn. We do have some key dates coming up. Tonight, a communication will go out to all families with further details on Stage 2. Tomorrow, our students enrolled in early childhood, elementary, specialized classrooms, and connections program will receive an email asking them to select in-person versus remote learning. This will need to be completed by October 9th at 3 p.m. I also want to encourage our community to continue to use the Let's Talk system to share questions that they have regarding our plan. We have had a wonderful response from the community corresponding via the Let's Talk platform, and we're able to route the message to the most appropriate staff member. As stated in the beginning of this presentation, our ultimate goal is for all students and staff to return to full in-person learning. Our number one commitment is to keep all people in our organization safe and healthy while modeling and staying grounded in our district mission. We do have to remain flexible and ready to pivot as necessary based on local data and metrics. Our goal remains to move to Stage 3 by November 30th if those metrics allow. I'd like to remind our community again, wear your mask, wash your hands, wash your social distancing, and to remember to conduct effective symptom monitoring and keep us informed as necessary to help control spread. This time, this team would be happy to answer questions from the Board of Education.
Okay, thank you for all of the detail involved in all that presentation and for all the various people who participated. Thank you for all of that. Now we will go to questions from the Board of Education. Charles.
First of all, thanks to the entire administration for all your hard work in pulling all this information together. I just wanted to say that it's really appreciated and all the effort and energy you're putting into it. So, a couple of questions. And we're doing, Kristen, are we doing the 3-question and then, okay, fine. All right, so I'll have to choose. Chuck, you mentioned the concept of a mask break. Can you describe what exactly that is? I think I know, but I want to just hear it.
Sure. Our students will be required, as well as our staff, to wear masks while in the schools. However, as we bring students back, especially our youngest learners, we know that enduring 2.5 hours even is a long period of time. So our teachers will be encouraged and will schedule time for students to head outside when the weather is decent enough to do so, and allow students to remove their masks as long as they're socially distanced. So that's an outdoor activity.
Okay. And what does that look like when it gets colder, as it invariably does in Illinois?
Yeah, so we won't, because we'll be indoors, then we won't necessarily be able to take mask breaks. Children are allowed to take their mask off when they're socially distanced and eating or drinking, but otherwise, as the guidelines are as of today, Mr. Cush, they would have to wear masks at all times, so we wouldn't have those outdoor mask breaks if the weather wouldn't allow us to do so. We would stick with our current sort of wind chill factors, which is actually 0. So for a good part of the year, even when it's cold outside, for 5 or 10 minutes, we can take students out safely.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
Next question is, will parents have the option to switch between the AM and PM schedules? You described a little bit how they'll be initially allocated, but will there be an option where parents can either petition or what have you to switch?
Sure. Our school principals will absolutely work with families if there's a need for a particular session, the AM or the PM. We won't be asking parents outright in the form that goes out tomorrow morning, only because there's so many factors to involve in making those the AM and PM designations, but parents are encouraged to reach out after they get their AM or PM session on October 13th. They'll receive that email if they need to make a switch.
Okay. And then for my third question in this round, Ms. Posey, you mentioned for the junior high and high school, can you describe on the chart, there was a blue section and then a pink section. When Chuck was going through his, I was able to kind of follow his sample schedule. Are the students on either the blue schedule or the pink schedule, or is that supposed to just represent both?
So at both levels, those students are following their schedule. Until we get in person, they're following their schedule, half their periods on Tuesday, the other half on Wednesday, the first half again on Thursday, the second half on Friday. And then we'll switch to an A-B rotation with 50% of the students coming in and doing both their, if in the high school example, 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and then they would go online, and the second group or group B would come in Thursday and Friday and do the same thing. They would rotate through all 8 periods.
Got it. So each student is doing each thing, each day that's indicated here.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Christine?
I think Jane mentioned earlier with the block scheduling for the junior high and high school kids, it's not a new model in education, but at least my time here in 203, we haven't seen it. So could you offer the community more detail on, I think my biggest question, or the question I'm anticipating is, how is sitting in one class longer, better? Because there seems to be that screen time, attention span, problem. So can you explain how the block scheduling can help that? The advantages to moving to that system?
Sure, there's a couple reasons for us, and it is something that other districts leverage. We have not, as you have said accurately. One thing that when we really looked at what would mitigate our, once we get in person, one, just transitions. So when we think about transitioning students over a period of 8 different periods, that's a lot of hallway time. So we really looked and said, okay, if we want to mitigate the mixing of groups, what's the model that could leverage that for us? So we really started thinking about that block schedule. The other thing that the block schedule does instructionally is once we bring students back into the building more consistently, 50% of the time, it gives our teachers time to be synchronous with all kids. So they'll have 50% in person, and then 50% will be live stream, but it gives them the opportunity then to provide asynchronous for the students at home and more targeted support to the half of the students that are in their classroom at that time. So the way that we extend that block will allow for, I would say, more robust synchronous and asynchronous. Instead of trying to get that type of support in 50 minutes, we now have that in 85. So we may have a synchronous lesson for 45 to 60 minutes, but then that teacher then can break off in small groups with live kids in the seats for that other part of the time. Does that answer your question?
It does. It's just, so just to be clear that I'm understanding, the kids who are choosing, the families that choose to stay in the online only for now, will they still have access to the teacher?
Yep.
So it's not gonna, it's just where the teacher, how they structure breaking out with which students at what time.
Right. What actually we really like about this model is after students are dismissed, teachers will have some extra time for student support. So at that time, if a student was an online-only student and needed to check in with the teachers from 1:30 to 3, they have a nice chunk of time where they could have maybe a teacher would bring small groups in, and they actually could leverage some of the asynchronous students, not just your online-only kids, but it gives them more flexibility to meet with students in an online setting and create some of that collaboration time for kids.
Okay. Jill?
I'll start with some of the logistical things. In terms of grouping the students into AM and PM schedules at the elementary level, how is this going to be done? You said it's not going to be done by last name. This is going to involve rearranging family schedules and everything, so I'm glad that can talk to their principal. But how will that initial grouping be done?
Right. As I mentioned in the presentation, the principals will take into account several things. It might require them to really look at the students that are requiring busing. We are going to be providing busing across all of our levels, actually multiple times throughout the day. So we have to be strategic about that transportation for the elementary students. And it may not be available at every school in the AM and in the PM. So that's a factor. Secondly, they'll take into account children that are on site for childcare, so that we can make sure that if we do need to transport students from one school to another for childcare purposes, that's sort of part of the equation. And then they can be very strategic because those students are already assigned to a classroom. Within that classroom of grouping students in the AM or in the PM based on academic support that might be pushed in or pulled out from that classroom throughout the day. Also social emotional learning support and such. So really kind of looking at the students that are in that class and making those groups based on what the needs are of those students at this time. And that's also very dependent on how many students in a particular class how many families sign up for in-person return versus online only. Because we'd want to group those online only students preferably together in the AM or in the PM so that they have that experience together and so that the teacher, quite honestly, also doesn't have to live stream from 8:15 to 2:30, that could actually be focused during either the AM or the PM.
So jumping off from there, let's say that a student has to be quarantined in the AM section, but the PM would be the online. Will there be the ability to kind of fluidly jump into that online section, right, while the student has to be at home for 14 days, and then transition back to the previous section? 'Cause I think with winter coming along, this is going to be happening a lot, right? These symptoms are varied and all over the place, right?
Yeah, that's actually a great question and a specific situation we anticipate. So a student that must be home for a quarantine situation could easily, in this model, actually fit into the sort of online only group and be part of that live stream instruction when home. Now, we may work with that family and see if we can move them from the AM to the PM, if the PM is where that live streaming is occurring, but we certainly wouldn't, we wouldn't restrict a student from having live streaming access regardless of which session they're in, AM or PM in that situation.
Thank you. And then my third question is another one about grouping at the middle school or the junior high and high school levels. With the last name grouping that was done in the previous models, everyone who is in a particular family would be at school at the same time. Do you see grouping students by a family again at the junior high and high school, which will be on kind of similar block schedules? If not, I see some real challenges for families out there.
Yes, so both the junior high and the high school models are adhering to the alpha split, and then obviously we'll make exceptions for family members and other issues that might come up that they would need an exception for. But as a rule, we will split them by alpha and then ask for parents to let us know if they need an exception for some other reason. For example, maybe two students in the same household with a different last name that need to be in the same part of the A or B schedule. And then on top of that, principals are going to have to do some class balancing to make sure that we adhere to the health and safety guidelines of space and use of our classrooms as well. So they'll be looking at that too.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I have Paul, and then Janet, and then Donna, and then I'll go, and then we'll start again.
Hi. When I look at the high school schedule, I don't see a lot of detail about lunch. Could you explain how that works out?
Sure. So at the high school level, that is the longest time that we have students in the building, but we are offering a breakfast in the morning for those students who would choose to access that. And then students would have an opportunity at 1:30 when the day finishes that they would be able to take the grab-and-go lunches that we currently offer. They would be able to take that home with them because they will be finished at 1:30.
Thank you. My next question is, could you explain how the transportation by bus will be made safe for the kids and what adjustments were being made in the buses?
We have, there will be assigned seating on the buses that will be loaded from back to front. There will be, the buses will be disinfected and after each route. I know there's a video coming out from our transportation director later this week that shows all the different safety precautions that are going on with the buses. We're going to be lowering the windows to provide more air circulation on a daily basis. For the routes, there will be sufficient spacing as much as possible on the buses. We know there's a limit to the number of students on the bus, but we feel we'll be much lower than those, the maximum limits allowed by Iasb and the IDPH.
Thank you. Last question. Last meeting I asked about COVID-19 testing for staff, students, and so forth, and I was told there was an ongoing investigation. Do we have any updates regarding that investigation?
Yeah, if you can give me a second, I'll pull up my information, maybe get another question, and I'll come back to him.
Okay, so we'll come back to Paul's third question and the answer for that, and right now we'll go to Janet.
I think there's some concern about families that are choosing online that they will maybe receive a lower level of engagement from their teacher as a result because the teacher will now be with in-person students. Can you talk about how we're going to try to mitigate that?
Sure. So there'll be the live stream. One thing is I'll start with the tech. So we have been doing a lot of demos to ensure that not only can the live stream students see what's happening in the classroom, but we've worked very closely with IT to ensure that they can hear as well, that they can participate in student engagement or student conversation. So not only with, we have a microphone that's going to be in the classroom so that they hear all the discussion that's happening, but also so we can we can hear them and their classmates will be able to hear them as well. One thing with the added technology that we have put in is that if there are labs going on, we want to make sure that the view and the I would say pixels, or I will maybe go to Roger to say what the exact is, but so that it's very clear. So our students will have the best live stream they can. Instead of just putting up a webcam, we really have gone to looking at extra monitors so that all of the kids can see each other. We still engage pretty authentically as best we can by the live stream.
Thank you. The connection schedule, could I ask, when I look at it as, it looks a little confusing to me, like in that it kind of flips around a little. Is there a reason why we, for 2 days make Group A the morning and 2 days make Group A the afternoon?
Yeah, that's to make sure that those students are able to access all of their classes so that they have the opportunity to come for in-person instruction for both their morning classes and their afternoon classes. But we also wanted to make sure that they had access to some kind of in-person instruction every day.
Okay, so it's because periods 1 and 2 are morning and then.
And 3 and
okay,
4 are in the afternoon.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Are you done? Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I read from information that I was provided directly by the DuPage County Health Department in regard to CDC recommendation. So I'll just read from the information that I was provided. Testing asymptomatic individuals without known exposure to a person with COVID-19 universal SARS-CoV-2. Testing of all students and staff in school settings has not been systemically studied. It is not known if testing in school settings provides any additional reduction in person-to-person transmission of the virus beyond what would be expected with implementation of other infection preventative measures, for example, social distancing, mask, hand washing, enhanced cleaning, and disinfecting. Therefore, the CDC does not recommend universal testing of all students and staff. Implementation of a universal approach to testing in schools may pose challenges, such as lack of infrastructure to support routine testing and follow-up in the school setting, unknown acceptability of this testing approach among students, parents, and staff, lack of resources, and other factors. We are continuing to work with the DuPage County Health Department about looking at options, but at this time, it's not a recommendation that's coming from them that we do that.
So I'm hearing we're not considering testing at this time.
We're not considering testing at this time, but we're continuing to have conversation with the DuPage County Health Department to see if any recommendations change.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got poll complete. Are you ready, Donna? Okay.
All right, well, thank you for that detailed presentation. I kind of want to go back way to the beginning and understand what we've learned in the first 6 weeks and how we've adjusted to that with that learning.
Sure, I think there's a lessons from a lot of us. And Jane, if you want to start.
Lessons that we've learned. One that we've learned, I think, from our educators is that they, not all of them, but I would say a lot of our educators are ready to welcome students back into our classrooms. Another thing that we have learned is kind of our adjustment to the schedule, that they did hear and felt that there was a lot of online all day, and really looking at what are some ways that we could look at the schedule differently to allow for more flexibility for our educators and for our students to not only receive targeted synchronous, but how could we think through our asynchronous time a little bit better so that we could provide more targeted instruction to small groups. I want to add anything. I don't know if my colleagues want to add anything else.
No, I would say, I mean, just for me, from talking to our educators as well as hearing from our parents and students, the structure of the day, right now, the amount of time, screen time with the traditional schedule based on the regulations that have been put before us by the Illinois State Board of Education has been very challenging for our families. So I think the approach we've taken now as we transition into stage 2 kind of changes that day a little bit. I recognize that any change we make to the schedule of a day impacts family schedules, but this is really responsive to a lot of feedback that we've been hearing from our educators, our kids, and our parents about the need to really rethink that time differently.
Okay, so my next question you may have touched on, but there may be more. And if there's not, that's okay. Just let me know. But my next question is, going way back to the beginning again, the survey that we conducted, how did that help us change, mold our return to learn plan to better meet the needs of students, families, and staff?
I'm going to ask Dr. Knowlton to speak in just a minute, but again, the primary purpose really of the survey was to collect feedback regarding our e-learning plan and what has been going on in our first stage. As we recognize that the need to be able to pivot quickly based on changing metrics and based on health conditions in our area, we want to be prepared to have to shift. While we don't want to go back to full e-learning, we have to be prepared to shift back to that. So as we think about looking down the road to a time we may have to transition back to do that, We wanted to get feedback from our families on how it was going, what was going well, what are areas that we could think about improving or changing if we have to shift back. Again, scheduling is one area that we've learned, is if we have to shift back, our schedule will not go back to at the high school level, that every period necessarily. We could look at this block scheduling. A secondary purpose was just to get a general impression of our families and community on returning to the classroom. Not intended to be specific or scientific, as we talked about tonight. As we prepare to transition into stage 2, each individual family will get a registration for their child for their specific purpose. The feedback on the first survey in that section remained extremely consistent from the time the survey was released through the completion of the survey, about a 70 to 30% from the evening that we released it until it closed. So we as it said in the executive memo, Patrick and his office went through a data scrubbing process to be able to kind of review the data, find anomalies, remove those anomalies, and ensure that this was something that we could get that general sense. Dr. Knowlton, is there anything you wish to add?
No, you did a great job covering it. Thank you. We found very, very few issues with technology access in terms of students being able to log in and access technology, access resources. And then probably not surprisingly, the area of initiating and sustaining relationships while online is a challenge, but I don't think that was something that stood out to us. But other than that, if you had any other questions.
My third question. So you mentioned families adjusting to schedules. Can we have a little insight into like the discussions that maybe were had about single and working parents managing this new schedule into stage 2?
Yeah, as Chuck said, especially for our youngest children, families or parents who may be experiencing challenges or difficulties with scheduling are encouraged to reach out to their building principals, who will work with them best to accommodate what schedule works for them. Again, any transition that we make in scheduling is going to require some modifications on all of our schedules. So families, we will work with the best that we can to accommodate what is best for them.
So what I'm hearing is that if a family is really struggling with the new proposals for stage 2, to reach out to their principal and try to see if they can
Discuss what
work together.
potential
Okay.
options are maybe to solve it.
Okay.
It's going to have to be a case by case on what the issues are that need to be solved.
Right, because it's unique for everybody. Okay, thank you.
Okay, my first question is thinking about those elementary students who are going back in the EC2 that are having the morning, afternoon alternation. How will we disinfect and clean our classrooms during that time period, and who will be doing that?
Sure, I can make some general comments, and then we actually have Mr. Dolan here tonight who is overseeing all of that. But as I said earlier in the presentation, the half-day is a really nice model to make sure that we are disinfecting between. We have the capacity with equipment that we have, as well as personnel, to make sure that all the high-touch areas are being disinfected throughout the day. That isn't something we wait for students to leave. And that would be bathrooms and doorknobs and high-touch surfaces and such. Those are things already in place with staff in the building and some limited students. But then in between sessions, and certainly after the PM session, our custodial crew will be disinfecting fully all of our classrooms before the next group of students come in.
I'm just going to add before Mr. Dolan speaks that he did work with Seneca Mondini, our Executive Director of Communications. Mr. Francis earlier referenced a video that we have that kind of that does an overview of our procedures for transportation. Mr. Dolan and Ms. Mondini also worked to produce a video that goes through more detail about our process. So, Pat, I don't know if there's any brief additional comments you'd like to make on behalf of what, in addition to what Chuck said.
I think Chuck covered it pretty well. Our goal is whenever a cohort or class changes, if we go from AM to PM, to make sure that we're addressing a complete disinfection of any surfaces or equipment or things like seating, backs of chairs, chair arms, all that sort of thing that are disinfected in between. There's just a couple of control aspects to that, and one is that we're not going to disinfect in the presence of any children or students at any grade level.
So our head custodians and facility managers are ready to mobilize a crew during that interstitial period so that we'd be able to accomplish it then. As Chuck had mentioned, we've upgraded equipment. We're adding daily new techniques that we're going to employ. Starting tomorrow morning, each principal and head custodian combination will be working together with some advice from myself to make sure that we'll be able to do what we can do as we need to do it.
And so my follow-up would be that's great to know in terms of the early childhood and the early elementary, that we have the ability to do that. What about as we head into the junior high and where it looks like we have, 5 minutes built into the schedule as we're bringing, I know that's a while in the future, but will you also be able to mobilize for those periods as well?
I think that we're still working out the final details. A lot of it depends really on classroom configuration, the number of desks, the number of surfaces. Most of our junior high and high schools classrooms will be set up with an A-B organization of all the desks so that we have at least a little bit of a reasonable amount of time to disinfect maybe one set of desks in preparation for the next students to come in and use the adjacent desks. We'll also, to be quite honest with you, probably partner with teachers, aides, staff in the building to help us perform some level of disinfection. So because we've kind of organized a number of different types of disinfection where we're using our electrostatic sprayers and spray bottles, to be honest with you, microfibers, as well as some wipes, like alcohol-based wipes. We think that we can provide the entire community of teachers, staff, and custodians with some measure of technique, basically, to disinfect in those quick passing periods.
And you're continuing to work out those details and work with the staff in terms of like the expectations?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. My next question is sort of a repeat, but I didn't quite get the understanding I need, and it's with regard to the participation from remote learners at home and how they'll be able to participate with their classes. So I heard you say, Jane, that we will be able to hear them and see them. Well, no, you said that we will be able to hear them and they will be able to hear and see. Can their classroom also see them, i.e. are you projecting them?
Yeah, so that's where that second monitor comes in. And so the second monitor will be able to showcase the students at home as well. So they'll be able to see in, and the students at home will be able to see them as well.
Okay, great. So then they would be able to interact, not just the students in class would be able to see the students at home and vice versa. Okay, great.
Yeah, I would say, just in the work that we've done with our educators and their feedback on how to make that interaction as seamless as possible and as real and authentic as possible. It's been really exciting to watch how, with multiple monitors, large screens, there are many different formats that the teacher can use based on what is appropriate for the type of instruction at the time. So.
And will you be testing that during that first, October 13th?
So,
week? Will you be doing some testing of that?
So our tech department has been working on establishing demo rooms in each of our schools. And Jane, you want to talk a little bit about the learning plan for the 8th and the 12th?
Yeah, so right now we have even set up the tech center to kind of be a virtual classroom. And so last week we had our learning support coaches kind of come in, look at that equipment. We're going to be doing 2 more days of that with our principals and some of our teacher leaders. And then by next Friday, every classroom EC2 will have their set up system of tech. And we also have provided some module learning to walk teachers through exactly how to set it up, exactly how to turn it on. We've done that through a slide deck, and also IT has also done it through kind of a cheat sheet, if you will, of how to set everything up. Many of our teachers right now are actually utilizing most all of the equipment. We do have teachers using double monitors. We already have document cameras in our classroom. We already have the teacher laptop in the classroom. One thing that will be new will be that microphone puck that they will have to set up so that we can have that volume. But they'll have a lot of readiness, and on the 12th, they will be going into the classroom and really testing that technology. One thing that IT also is doing is ensuring that in every building, junior high and high school as well, that there is a test classroom this week. So we'll make sure that all of our buildings have a test classroom so that our teachers can go in and get comfortable with that tech.
And will they use students in their testing as they're going through that? After the 12th, after all the training is done, will there be some level of
Yeah, so what will happen is what we're envision happening is that week of the 12th, that first week when students aren't in, that they will actually be utilizing that technology. But like I said, a lot of our teachers are already utilizing the technology with the extra monitor and with the extra laptop in there. So they will be kind of testing it out where they'll be the only instructor in the classroom at the time, but they'll be live streaming all of their students. And so they'll be able to troubleshoot. And we'll ensure that our computer support analysts, our learning support coaches, our, essays as well, our support analysts are going to be on hand to make sure that we really can troubleshoot and support our teachers.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, what about parents who choose in person, but then feel, things change and they want to, maybe they're less comfortable with that, maybe they see something that they're, hasn't caused our district to make a change yet, but that they're uncomfortable with. Are they locked in, or what do you envision in terms of going back and forth?
Yeah, one of the benefits of the scheduling that we have as we move into stage 2 and into stage 3 is that ability to be able to respond to changing needs, either by individual families or overall we as a community and as a school district. So our principals and our schools will work with families as those issues arise to ensure that they can seamlessly flow into one or the other.
And I know that that will have to be the case when people are quarantining, but even, for example, if you went and were on a travel and then you wanted to just be careful for the sake of others, that would be something where you need to be remote instead of in person, and that would be something that would be welcomed, I would think, from
If
the
there's
district.
a condition which requires a quarantining, then yes, that's what we do.
Okay. All right. We're on to our second round. I think I started with Charles. Go right ahead.
Thank you. All right. Earlier in the presentation, we mentioned that one of the first phases is going to be at 10% capacity, and then we'll be at 25% capacity. Can you speak a little bit more to how that 10% will be selected, how that's going to be determined, and then subsequently how the 25%? What's the criteria that goes into which 25%? Who will be who will be in the 10%, and then who will be in the 25%?
Sure. Well, the 10% can change from day to day or week to week, depending on what students are struggling with material or with standards or with engagement, attendance. It depends on whether it's an academic or a social emotional need. Some kids may just need a little boost to get organized and get started, and others may need some long-term support who are struggling with the actual material and the e-learning structure itself at both levels, both junior high and high school. As we increase students coming in, and especially at the junior high level, they're very interested in getting all 3 grade levels to come in and get really acclimated by grade level, do some activities, do some reacclimation to the building and the different pathways around the social distancing, the masks, and sitting in class and getting that instruction. And then both at the junior high level as well as the high school, we'll also be looking at those courses, as I said earlier, courses that might lend itself to needing lab demonstrations or other hands-on activities, thinking about foods class at the high school, or some of our research and design courses, or any of the the courses that would require lab demonstrations in a science class, for example. So that was, we increase, when you think about the high schools, for example, think about, 10% of the students is still going to be, if you include all the staff in the building, is going to be about 500 people at a time. And so moving 500 people through the building is going to take a little while to get used to the different navigation and the different requirements. Junior high, on a smaller scale, is going to have that same thing. So we want to make sure that both staff and students are very comfortable with what we're asking them to do, also to increase the in-person for them so that they can continue to build those relationships and collaborate in person.
So then, is the 25%, it's not like a strict 25, that's the target, it's
Yes,
approximately
exactly,
25, based on the factors that you've
Yeah,
outlined.
I would describe
Exactly.
it more as it's not a set group of individuals. It's more like a capacity limit that we have in terms of, to ensure that we follow our restrictions. So as Ms. Posey said, that number, or who those people are, can change based on what the need is, day to day, week to week.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And I only have 2 questions this round. Second question is, can you describe some of the success metrics or what we're going to put in place to kind of track how well this is working? And I know one of the criteria is obviously going to be, the safety and health and those stats. But things such as measures of the socialization, what's happening there, measures of the retention of the information through these different models. And then for those who opt for online versus those who are moving forward with the returning to in-person instruction, do we have plans for any of those measures? And then one last element would be measuring the quality of instruction. I think one of the individuals tonight asked a question around that, and I thought it was a pretty good one around just understanding how we're going to understand that.
So
these differences.
a lot there. Jane, maybe you can begin, talk a little bit about some of our benchmark assessments and other assessments that we do to monitor, and then if Patrick, there's anything to add, and then also turn to Chuck and Stephanie. Christine, if there's anything you want to throw in on SEL.
So we should be measuring as we would in our regular setting. Our teachers work together to identify the essential standards. And so when we look at those essential standards and they create their formative assessments and then their summative assessments and their PLCs, they need to leverage that and look at that data as it relates to students that are in person with them, and then what does that data look like for our students at home. We also will look at our benchmark assessments. We continue to administer our benchmark assessments. Those are our curriculum-based measures that we write internally that align to our curriculum. We can produce those, or we can administer those in person and online. And again, our PLCs need to look and say, what does the data tell us? What is the evidence? Are students meeting standards? What students are not meeting standards? And then how do we support those students? We also look to say if the students have already mastered standards, and how do we differentiate that instruction? So we really are communicating with our teachers right now that they need to be aligned within their professional learning communities with their assessment collection and creation so that they can have those conversations about the evidence of learning within the in-person instruction once that happens, and then also in the online setting to say what is the difference, and then they could adjust their instruction. And sometimes it's just looking at the asynchronous versus synchronous. So those are the conversations that PLCs are having right now. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Knowlton?
We're proceeding as though we will be administering the accountability assessments that we typically start administering once we pass January, get into March and April. So from a accountability perspective, we haven't been told anything other than that is going forward. Of course, we're quite interested in where students are. As you probably remember, we adopted the NWA MAP growth product last year. We were able to administer it in the fall and the winter, just not the spring, unfortunately. We're positioned and ready to administer that once obviously students are back and they're comfortable and they've acclimated, they're familiar with the wellness and the health and safety pieces of coming to school. That product fortunately features an ability to take a look at how much loss actually occurred, possibly due to what's called COVID slide. So we'd be using information like that. So we really want to take a look at where students are and then kind of go forward with that, not just at the student level, but as a whole at the school level and as well at the district level.
I would add attendance and engagement is also things to be reviewing. Chuck or Stephanie, anything to add?
I guess I would, on top of what I've heard, I would add, Mr. Cush, there's certainly a qualitative component to this, right? So, we listen to, at early childhood and elementary, our educators, as Mrs. Willard was talking about, our principals, our teachers, our parents, right? We've more or less accelerated our original plan to bring our youngest learners back in person in stage 2, which was originally our sort of stage 3 plan, right? And a lot of that is due to qualitative, feedback that we're receiving from our teachers and their involvement in planning for the students that are in front of them, albeit virtual right now, and their need to teach children in front of them. And so we'll do the same as we bring students back. I can't probably stress enough, I think we heard public comment about this tonight, that schools will be different for our students who are returning in person. Wearing a mask, socially distancing, washing hands, using hand sanitizer when you leave a space and re-enter a new space. Those will be different experiences for our children, and we'll want to make sure that we're talking to, listening to our educators in our schools to make adjustments to our plans so that we're supporting our students as well. So on top of the quantitative things that I've heard from my colleagues, I would add that piece.
You done?
Yes, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay. All right. Who else has a second round of questions? Okay, Christine.
The reference to the videos that you said are being made for just like processes and stuff, is that going to be on our website, or are we will the community be able to see it so that they can get familiar with everything we're going to implement?
These are intended to be external communication pieces for our community, yes.
Okay,
They're
and they'll
posted
be
on our
able
website, communicated through Talk 203 that they're released, they're posted, where to find them, and they'll stay there, yes.
Okay, so then really the kids, if they watch the videos maybe with their parents ahead of going back to school, like little things to, just sort of like as a prep, like.
Yeah,
this
Senator
is what
Katie,
it
you want
might
to just
look
provide a
like.
brief overview of just kind of the theme of each of the three?
Absolutely. Our goal was to provide sort of a real look at the real people who are serving our community right now. So we have 3 videos that we're going to be launching this week. A transportation that talks about the seating arrangements, the cleaning, how kids will exit and enter the bus wearing masks. And again, that could be a good talking point with a family. The second one is our health and safety procedures about the self-monitoring, the mask wearing, temperature checks, all those sorts of things. And then the third is our cleaning and sanitization process. And this takes a look at all the surfaces that are being touched, our filters, maybe not as much of a discussion point with the family, but might make some of our parents feel a little bit rest assured that we are taking the steps needed.
Yeah, so again, this is not a step-by-step orientation, so to speak. It's more of an overview to provide just kind of a sense of our processes.
Okay, just as long as, I'm just thinking the more people can get familiar with anything as we move into the next stage, if we can eliminate any anxiety, I'm pretty much for it.
That's really our goal with this, and we'll push it out, like Mr. Bridges said, through social media, through a Talk 203 on our website. Everyone will have access to it.
And then just my second question is with staffing, are we okay with like the substitute pool? And then even thinking of like our bus drivers and custodians, because really without any of those people, this is going to fall apart quickly if, too many people just happen to get sick at the wrong, at the same time.
So that certainly is a factor that we are concerned about, ensuring that we do have adequate substitutes in the event that individuals have to quarantine. You saw our quarantine numbers during the presentation. Those were not necessarily something as a result of workplace or school-based settings, but there may be needs for staff members to have to quarantine for a period of time. So we are going to need an increased substitute pool. For members of our community who may have a background and interest in substitute teaching, I encourage you to go to our Human Resources page on our website and look at an application to be considered for that. Christine, do you have anything to add?
No, other than we have been certainly working towards that. We're continuing to build that pool and making sure that we have an increase. We've also been working to get some permanent building subs available. We've had a couple opportunities. Mr. Ross has done some work on that have kind of fallen through, but he continues to kind of build on that. It's one of those measures that's just going to have to take us a little bit of time. And in terms of what is happening when, and we've also got plans in place to move and shuffle things around when we need to help support the process.
And then just as a tacking onto that, any substitutes that we bring in, is there going to be an opportunity for them to be like somewhat trained in the processes that we're implementing, just so that they don't get thrown into a classroom and not only have to help pick up the material, but they also know how it's going to operate from a safety standpoint?
Yes, our principals will work with any substitutes to ensure that they are aware of our procedures and our protocols.
Thanks.
Okay, I have Janet, and then Joe, and then Donna. Paul, do you have additional questions or no? Yes, okay, so we'll go Janet, Joe, Paul, Donna, and then myself.
Thanks. Slide 15, can I just clarify? These are the symptoms that were set forth by IDPH, correct?
That is correct.
And so if a student exhibits runny nose, then we will send them home.
Correct, unless we have an alternate diagnosis on hand.
Okay. And then, so to slide 17, the return to school protocols, if we don't have that alternative diagnostic test, so I think I need a little help understanding
The chart.
the waterfall, right, of
Sure.
the chart.
So if they're exhibiting one or more symptoms of COVID-19 without an alternate diagnosis, then we will treat them as if they are a student with COVID-19. They will have to be out for 10 days, and until the symptoms are gone and the individual is also fever-free for 24 hours without medication.
Okay. So without that physician's note, if they have a runny nose and they're sent home, they're going to be gone for 10 days.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the release from isolation letters for rows 1 and 2.
Yes.
Is that pretty? Is that pretty easy, or do people know how to get that? Is that
Yeah,
just a
that
standard
comes through the
part?
DuPage Health Department, the county health department. So what happens is if they have a positive test or they've been diagnosed, they're sent over, their names and information is sent over to the health department. The health department uses that to begin contact tracing. So it's really important when the health department calls that we call the health department back, because that's how you get the letter then to return to school when they release you from isolation.
Okay, so I think that line 3 is probably important. If there's a way for us to set expectations with families, with students and parents that that runny nose is gonna, without that physician, without access to a physician or good health insurance or whatever, you're gonna be at home for 10 days. So that I think that might be surprising to people, and so to the extent that we can set that expectation, I think that'd be helpful.
Absolutely. We've been certainly trying to say that every opportunity we have, and as parents, we're going to be re-asking them reminding them about that symptom monitoring, so we've got it set up to go in there as well. So yes, we'll continue. I agree.
Okay, I think I have Joe next.
Yeah, thank you for providing the current COVID and quarantine numbers for students and staff. I was wondering what kinds of metrics would be reported on the website to the public. Would a table like this be reported? And in terms of the tables, the DuPage County Health Department and the level of risk activities, where you had the items circled in red kind of showing where we're at right now. I think that's a very helpful table, and it would be great to get that on the website as well, so that every week families can check and see, we're in the moderate in these and in the minimal in these, and here's where we are overall, kind of that progress report.
Absolutely. I believe our plan is to make sure that we present that every time we come to the board meeting so that everybody's aware of where we are.
So those same tables, the same charts will be presented at each board meeting throughout this, and then posted on the website so that they are available through board docs.
Great. Another question I had about the elementary school schedule. I have to pick on this one as a science educator. All of the core subjects are in the on-ground part, except for science, which is only in the asynchronous part. Can you discuss how students are going to make progress toward the next generation science standard goals, and especially the fifth graders who have to take the ISA?
Yeah, I'll start by talking just from kind of an instructional minute allocation standpoint, if I could. And that is to say that certainly we couldn't prioritize everything in a 2.5-hour in-person sort of day. So that's where science actually ended, as you pointed out, in the asynchronous time. However, they will get a licensed teacher who will be teaching them science directly live. That will be a weekly lesson minimally with all students from kindergarten through fifth grade, and then additional science asynchronous activities similar to what they're receiving in the other core subjects as well. And so those all will be aligned with the standards that we're actually utilizing our Learning Commons directors and teachers who are very familiar with our STEM instruction and are responsible for that on a typical weekly basis. But it certainly was a prioritization of what happens when students are in the building versus what we can actually accomplish when students are in that asynchronous setting. And Mrs. Willard or Dr. Knowlton may want to add on in terms of the actual assessment piece related to the state test.
The only thing that I will add that Mr. Freund is they are accessing our curriculum. So it won't be that we're supplementing with just STEM activities, but we're actually taking our new curriculum that was adopted 2 years ago, and they're implementing exactly what they would have had from their classroom teacher. It's just the teacher's different. So I appreciate your push for us to continue science. It is actually a curriculum we're very proud of, and one of our newer curriculum that students get very excited about. So we wanted to ensure that we still had that curriculum alive and well within our framework, and knowing that our fifth graders will take that assessment. So I think our principals and teachers came up with a good solution to ensure that it's still alive and well within our curriculum.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Paul?
My question is sort of a follow-up to Joe's question. I haven't seen a change in the calendar, so I was curious to see if this plan allows us to teach a District 203 quality curriculum and complete it in the time we have, and how might that affect, say, advanced placement courses with tests that might occur in May?
So that's where our teachers will also access that asynchronous time. So it's going to be very important that, especially in those rigorous AP courses, that not only do they have that extended time, that 1 day a week, but they're accessing the asynchronous time so that our students will be able to engage in that learning every single day.
Short answer is yes. In the schedule, we will be able to accommodate our curriculum and our essential standards, and the AP courses there are requirements that we must fulfill, and the schedule will ensure that we do that. Dr. Knowlton?
We're both high schools taking advantage of remarkable resources that the College Board's providing to support AP instruction, including like live instruction as well online. So, I mean, that's something that we are forwarding. We collaborate closely with the College Board on making sure that we take advantage of all the resources possible to support AP. We haven't heard anything specifically about the format of assessment yet, but we're in close touch with them.
Thank you.
Donna?
Okay, so my question is also revolving a little bit around staff development. I've heard you speak about the staff development for the new technology in the classroom. I guess my concerns around staff development extend much further than that, about adjusting lessons, monitoring 2 sets of students at the same time. I heard a little bit of that already. Assessments, best use of asynchronous time. Like, how how are we supporting teachers and their workload around all of that?
So we're doing it in a couple different ways. So this summer, I'm going to go back to kind of some of the things that we've done ongoing. I think we've shared that we had about 90 educators that participated in a pretty lengthy Career 203 course on online. Then what we did is we extended that learning and developed that learning for all of our educators at the start of the school year. Now, that's not exactly tackling the block schedule, but it is looking at what are our best practices in online learning and teaching, and that does talk through our asynchronous and our synchronous time. The other pieces are those job embedded sides. So we implemented that PLC time for elementary every Monday, continuing to do the PLC time for high school during that time, and then our junior high has it 2 blocks one block during their day, every day. What that time is really been devoted to right now is that instructional plan. And our LSCs, our learning support coaches, offer that right just-in-time PL through the job embedded piece. They have lunch and learns during the day. They have office hours that their teachers are engaging and reaching out to them. And our colleagues, or our teachers, are really leaning on one another, especially in the high school. We have a lot of teachers that have a lot of experience in the blended learning. And so they're taking what they know about blended and now and applying that into a block. And so as they prepare for these next few days of professional learning, I've been meeting with the learning support coaches, both Mrs. Posey and Mr. Freund have been meeting with the principals and really looking over their plans on how they're going to support their teachers. And there's going to be a lot of professional collaboration time. Our teachers need to get in there, talk through some of the structures that are working currently, and then what are some things that need to be adjusted. And our teachers are our best learners, and they're the best colleagues right now.
Thank you. I just envision myself in a classroom and trying to do all the adjustments. So I appreciate all that we're giving them for support.
And there will be a time. I mean, this is going to be, even with the tech, they're going to need some time to go in, and they're going to have to learn it. Logs in. There might be some bumps along the way, but we know our staff and our families and our students are going to be patient because this is new waters for everybody.
Thank you. I also had a question to follow up on the COVID dashboard that we were going to get at each of the board meetings. Can we include the previous data so that we can see how it's changing? Like, instead of just having that block that we have today, like, can we also have this block plus the new information from what we'll get from the next meeting?
I think we can do that. I mean, we'll have the data. I'm just trying to think about just the accuracy of understanding the info. Christine, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think we can probably make something like that happen. It would not necessarily be on that chart. We'd probably have to pull it off that chart and lay it out, but there's no reason that I'm gonna manage that data anyway, so to keep it in one spot shouldn't be too much more difficult.
Thank you. That's my numbers nerdy person coming out. Thank you. And then we mentioned about all the new tech. I guess I'd like to understand the budgeting for that.
Okay, for the in order to accommodate the additional technology we need, it's just over $300,000 for a total spend on all of the technology. Roger, do you want to speak to how we're going to accomplish that?
I didn't really hear that.
300,000.
What?
300,000.
Okay.
Yeah, as Mr. Bridges said, it was about $347 per classroom to outfit with the tech that we needed. Most of that is new cost, new spending that was required by this initiative to meet this need. Some of it we can absorb in our existing budget, but there's a good portion of that is new cost that's just made necessary by this endeavor.
So is that coming out of our COVID contingency, or where is that coming from?
Mike?
Yeah, there's a variety of grants that we're receiving through the CARES Act. There's actually 4 resources, the original CARES dollars that are allocated towards the school district. We're getting some reimbursement from CARES through the DuPage County ROE. Will County is also providing an allocation to the school district. And then we're also working with FEMA to get some reimbursement on PPE. All that said, we're looking at our original CARES budget application and reallocating some dollars to maximize our grants and reimbursements for COVID-related expenditures. We do have contingency also, and there are also some expenditures that are not occurring in the school district or that are less because of some remote learning. So there will be some reallocation of originally budgeted costs to cover some of our expenses. We don't have a full, we don't have that full understanding yet, but as time goes on, we will be able to inform the board closer as to whether we need to amend the budget in any way to cover any additional costs. We might have some additional costs. You know, at the next board meeting, we might need some, especially technology is the biggest area of the additional costs that we're looking at. We may need to ask the board for additional resources for some additional costs that we don't even know right now. So we will keep the board informed of those additional costs, and then how they affect and relate to the budget as we move forward. We'll be monitoring that on a monthly basis.
Because I recall with the contingency that as we dip into that, that's going to be part of what you inform us about, correct?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part of your
I
question.
said part of what I remember with the budgeting is that as we dip into the contingency, that's going to be we're going to be informed about that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That just wanted to make sure I was on the right page. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we had a question earlier about lunches at the high school level. My question was a little bit different than what we asked earlier. The lunch period is built into the day. So how will that work for students as they hit that lunch period time? Will they be able to leave early and come in late?
Sure. So if you look at our schedule, it is built as we typically run our exam schedules, which puts as much as possible our early release or our late arrival and our lunches at the beginning and end of the day, so those students don't have to arrive until their first academic course. And so that also alleviates some of the number of students in the building as well as the passing period issues. So yes, they will be able to come late and leave early based on their schedule.
Or in this case, if they're at home, sleep in or be done a little bit
Correct.
early to work on their homework. Right.
Correct. And if
Okay.
their lunch is during the day where they are not able to leave, say they ride the bus or it's in the middle of the day, there'll be some supervised study type areas where they can go and get their work done, socially distanced, and have access to what they need there as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you talk a little bit, I know Donna sort of hit on it a little bit when she was talking about teachers, but this is a big change. You know, looking at, for example, that elementary level, teachers are going to be doing twice those presentations as well as the live stream. They've got the asynchronous as well. Can you talk about how you worked with teachers to develop this plan and the kinds of feedback that you've received? And I'm talking particularly about the elementary, but of course with regard to the scheduling, with regard to junior high, et cetera, as well.
I'll begin, and I'll ask Mr. Freund, Mrs. Willard to talk more specifically, but I believe it began with a group of educators who we said, if we're going to move forward with this, how would you do it? And then from there, we worked to try to address their, feedback, questions, concerns, and ideas that they had. Mr. Freund?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We, we started, several weeks ago as we had students back in stage one, and our school year began with additional conversations with our educators. We had a specific committee that we basically put that sort of problem on the table, right? So as we move into stage 2 and stage 3, and we consider welcoming students back, what would that look like from your perspective? And so we had grade level teams really kind of wrestle with that and talk to us more about not just the educational practices in terms of the teaching, but also the technology that would be needed. What would they need in their classrooms in terms of equipment, technology-wise and non-technology. And then we also took that to our principal groups for further consideration. And then as we got the technology pieces to really come into play and test those in classrooms more, we involved teachers to come in and actually sort of talk with us to say, well, if that was an iPad instead of a document camera, I could also do this and this. Or if the microphone would allow students in the classroom to be picked up so that students at home could hear them, and using our audio systems that are already in the classroom, we can hear the students at home. That will further connect students who right now are together remotely, but would be physically separated, obviously, when we start to bring in some students. So we've had, quite honestly, really great conversations with our educators who have shaped quite a bit of the plan that I shared this evening.
And a similar process at the high school and junior high level as well. Many LSCs came in, administrators. Obviously, we're tied a little bit more to periods and the day pattern, but same kind of discussions took place where we're really thinking outside the box. What do you need to get this accomplished? And they certainly came through.
Thank you for that. I'm really glad to hear that we're going through that process. The more that we continue those conversations, their feedback is essential because they are the ones doing it. So they've got those great insights that we can sometimes not always know. So thank you for that. My next question is with regard to those individuals who are from the junior high and high school level that are disappointed to hear how long they have to wait. I know that we're working towards that 10%, and I am relieved to hear that you're going to work on the transition for like those 6. That's very good because we've had lots of questions about that, like those students who are transitioning that are high need. For parents who are feeling very anxious about, their own students' progress in remote learning or those kinds of things, what kinds of things can they do right now to ensure that they are able to communicate that message? Is that something you would recommend for parent-teacher conferences? Is that something they should let the principal know about? Those kinds of things so that those who are just really thinking, gosh, November seems a long way away, that they can, ensure that their students' needs are met.
Sure. Well, we obviously want to reach out, and we're keeping track of all kinds of data points, as I said earlier, from attendance, engagement, participation in class, mastery of standards, the social emotional well-being. And so those will be students that we'll target throughout the time, increasing to 25%, including the transitions. Remember that our junior high and high school students also are participating right now in many extracurricular activities, which gives an additional level of engagement that they can participate in at both levels. And we certainly wanted to support the elementary school. I think our younger learners, we all agree, are probably having a more difficult time in this. Not that it's easy for anyone, but e-learning is especially difficult at that level. So knowing that our students can progress through this a little bit more slowly, and that the health and safety metrics make it a little more difficult to bring our larger schools back. We're taking this one step at a time and making sure that as a district we can move forward.
It's clear that the feedback was that early childhood, it was a priority to get back. I'm just, for those families that have expressed the concerns with their students, I want to make sure that they know the avenues to express those concerns. Okay, additional questions from the board? Okay. I have one more question, and it is specifically with regard to the conversations that we want to have our families have. So we put up our slide, and it talked about, the numbers in terms of the COVID instances, the numbers of people quarantining. We definitely have families that, they look at that, they see, it is a more significant number in terms of the students quarantining, et cetera. What kinds of conversations can our parents be having at home to talk with their students about safe practices, whether that's in athletics or in whatever other areas our students are coming into contact, or in terms of our families, what kinds of things are just essential that we talk about so that we can ensure that we're going to be able to continue on this progression?
Yeah, I'll make a few comments, and then Dr. Igo, if there's anything you want to add. But certainly our progression through our Return to Learn plan from one stage to the next and deeper into our stages really relies on our local metrics and really relies on ensuring that we are controlling community spread. Our decision-making process is influenced by the DuPage County Health Department, Illinois Department of Public Health, the CDC, and many agencies regarding how to reduce and limit community spread. I like all of you, I don't know how to say it any other way than I'm done with this. and what we're working through and how we're dealing with this. This is difficult on all of us. But there are sacrifices that have to be made. And I would encourage families to have conversations about large social gatherings without social distancing, without masking, traveling to areas where we've identified with a greater percentage of positive cases or greater cases of 100,000. Making sure that you, when, as Dr. Igo said earlier, answer the phone when the phone number from the health department comes, because that's contact tracing underway. Communicating with buildings, principals or health staff regarding potential exposure, and understanding that this plan allows for a student who may have to quarantine to be able to still access the full content. And so I think it's just, again, you know, wear the mask, watch the distance, wash your hands, practice good hygiene, and ensure that, you know, as we begin that return to learn, you are symptom monitoring. Christine, any additional recommendations that you'd make?
No, I think you hit on all the big and most important things. Again, we really want to make sure people are, it's easy to lose track of how close 6 feet of distance, right? You're in a group, you think you have it, you start to talk, you get close, but really taking that time to be very conscious of what is 6 feet, because that is really the biggest thing we can do to help make sure we can stay safe and healthy.
Particularly as we're losing our ability to be outside. I think, you know, that question about, you know, having that social distance, especially inside, and using the mask, especially inside, is important as well. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any more, so that will conclude our Return to Learn update. So we will move on to item 7.03, President's Report. I just want to remind the board that we have our Iasb DuPage event coming up this week, and that there has been a schedule announced for the November 20th summit, which is taking the place of the Triple I. So be sure to take a look at that schedule. There do look like there's some great speakers, and let Susan know if you would like to participate in that event as well. Okay, moving on, we will go to item 7.04, Board of Education reports. Do we have any Board of Education reports this evening? Okay, I don't see anybody, so we will move on to discussion without action, and that is item 8.01, Iasb resolutions.
Mrs. Fitzgerald just mentioned the joint annual conference held collaboration among the Illinois Association of School Boards, Illinois Association of School Administrators, and Illinois Association of School Business Officials, and that the joint annual conference is held every November in Chicago. Due to the current pandemic, the meeting, as you just referenced, will be a summit virtually. However, the delegate assembly will still meet. The delegate assembly process is one of the most important processes of the annual conference, where the state association has an opportunity to hear from its membership about potential resolutions or positions that the state association should take. Loaded in board docs, which we had just kind of posted on Thursday, is the resolution recommendations from the resolution committee. A handful of resolutions and position statements are in there. Cabinet has had an opportunity to briefly review it. Upon a brief review, we support the recommendations of the resolutions committee based on the rationale that is provided. You know, there are some in there that the board may wish to have conversation about. I look at resolution number 2, which was also the subject of some public comment earlier, but historically, IASB position statements have dealt directly with issues that happen inside a school district, whereas statement number 2 is not specifically. And so again, at this point, the administration supports the recommendations of the committee. Based on feedback or questions from the board, we'd be happy to look closer at any others and come back at the November 19th with our response.
Excuse me? I think you said November 19th, but I think you mean, yeah, October. Yeah. Okay. So before we begin, I just want to mention that I did do a little research today in terms of hearing a little bit about the process that is going to happen for the new resolutions. There was a couple questions about those that are, the way they phrase it is, I think, appealing the discussion. And the way that it works for ISB is that if the resolution is recommended do not adopt, there will not be a vote on that resolution unless a majority of the districts say that they want to vote on that. So in order for us to have votes on any of these that are recommended do not adopt, they must first, the sponsoring district must first decide that they wish. And then once they make that decision to appeal it, there would be a vote on whether or not to have a vote. And then there would be a vote on the resolution. Okay, so that's new. I didn't realize that about the procedure. Joe?
Yeah, I attended an introduction to the process, and I think it's not just the district that wrote it, but any district can pull a do not adopt off of the consent agenda to not adopt things and put it back on for discussion.
Okay, so right now, it looks as if there has been an appeal from the gun storage, but not from the loan program, although they may expect it. The school report card does not have an appeal right now, and they don't expect it. And sorry, my microphone seems to be going in and out, but, and then the other ones, let's see. Yes, the teacher certification does have an appeal. And then there's a couple that I do not expect that the local, you know how there's the 2 local control, items 7 and 8. I did ask about that on whether or not there would be one on version 8, and there will not be, since they already have the other one that's on resolution 7. And again, that can change. They have until November 7th, I guess. And as Joe said, other people could also do it on their behalf. So there could be, so it's probably best that we have a thought about what we wish in the event that any of them are challenged or any of them decide to appeal. In terms of the gun storage one, I did ask some specific questions about that, given the recommendation of do not adopt. I also went through and looked at past position statements. They make the assertion that very seldom do they go beyond the school walls, and so I went to look as to when they have. There were 2 that I found. Number 1 is with regard to bicycle safety. There was a resolution written by a board asking that boards be encouraged to notify students about bike safety and safe bicycling. So that's drafted quite differently. That was adopted. There did end up being legislation that required boards to notify about safe bicycling, which Iasb then opposed because it was a mandate. So that was kind of a convoluted process. But then the second one, yeah.
So I would say that still occurs on school property. Like if students are riding, a number of students ride their bikes to school. So I think that one still is within the realm of things that are occurring in school property.
Okay. And like I said, it was also drafted differently because it encouraged people to notify. The second one that I found was one on safe railroad crossings. And the way that was drafted, it was drafted to say Iasb calls on federal, state, and it named some local people to work towards safe crossing. I'm paraphrasing, something like that, safe crossing. And so it was drafted a little bit differently than this one, where this one is really just putting it on Iasb. Iasb shall support and advocate in this legislation, as opposed to calling on others to work on this on behalf or just expressing our support for it. It is actually putting it as a legislative priority. So I think in terms of that, we want to just start thinking, is this, though we may support the goals, is that something that we want to have as an Iasb priority, given the other priorities that will be coming up this year, funding, et cetera, assessment, disparities, all the various things? Or, do we feel like it merits going beyond sort of those school walls, as has been done, occasionally? I think as well, it's noteworthy to note that I did speak to the folks who were at the committee. Joe, I don't know if you happened to be listening when they were discussing the gun storage. The vote against it and in favor of saying, this is not a school issue was 20-2. So it was somewhat convincing and there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about rephrasing it, which can't be done anyways. I did ask that question, could we rephrase? Could we ask the school district to rephrase? We're past that, and so we aren't able to ask them to modify it so that it's, changed in any way. Okay, so, sorry, I just wanted to pass on all that background info. I did ask if there were other things that had happened in the past that have now been taken out of the Iasb resolutions, because once it becomes law, they do get rid of it, as is done, as you can see from the amendments. So, I'm waiting on that answer. I didn't get that answer yet. But I guess I would be interested to hear perspective on that, as well as the variety of other resolutions that we want the district to take a look at. Definitely quite a bit of controversy, it sounds, over the one on local control for the pandemic. And so that was much more split as to the resolutions committee as to whether or not that was something that they wanted to see in this case, given that it is sort of a international and statewide, certainly, situation. And, there was varying opinions about whether or not they wanted to see local control there or allow the governor, in the case of a pandemic, to have more of that statewide approach. Thoughts or comments from the board? Donna, sorry.
So reading through all the resolutions, I would agree that although the gun storage is a cause that I think that we would all, stand behind, I don't think that it's one that the IASB needs to take on, because it's not regulating anything within a school, it's regulating things within a home. So, yeah, I think that I would agree with their do not adopt. I'd say that I would agree with the resolutions or the way that they've been presented by the committee, except when we get to the local controls. So I guess my concerns, questions revolve around 7 and 8. And I would agree with their not supporting 8, but I was leaning towards not supporting 7 as well. So I would like to understand 7 more.
Janet.
With regards to the gun storage resolution, I understand how it's not regulating something within schools and it's within homes. I guess for me, I think that it's so adjacent or, actually directly impacts school safety that that I would actually be okay going against the resolutions committee recommendation to not adopt. And so, there would be like 2 decisions there. The first decision about the appeal, and then if it were, if the appeal happened, to support it. So that's, I can see, it just seems to be very much related to school safety and to, kind of our overall desire to address, student suicide issues and SEL issues. So again, not directly related to schools, but like very adjacent to those issues.
Additional thoughts from other board members on any resolution that they're interested in kind of hearing more from the administration about, or their thoughts? I think I see Joe, and then I see Charles.
Yeah, regarding number 2, I agree with Janet, especially in the spirit of number 2. I don't like some of the wording in number 2. I would have liked them to word it a little bit better, or to have, afterward gone back and asked for a slight change in that. But in terms of the spirit of number 2, I do agree with it, and I would support not supporting the resolutions committee, so I would recommend adopting on that. For the safety reasons, this does impact an age group that is within the schools, and this does impact safety as well. In terms of number 7, I thought about this, and this one seems a little bit looser in terms of the wording. It shall encourage members of the Congress, the General Assembly, et cetera, to take a regional approach to the response of health emergencies, which is kind of the state we're in right now, with Illinois broken up into regions. And it doesn't say that they require the state, or the state has to go in this direction. So the state could still react initially the way it was, statewide, but then move into kind of where we are right now. I guess I don't necessarily see this as adding anything to the discussion, because this is kind of where we are right now. We're in a regional situation. So I'm okay with adopting it, but I'm okay with going the other way as well. This one I feel like doesn't add anything to the discussion.
Charles.
So I wanted to weigh in on number 2. It's interesting. I thought a lot about this, and while I understand the committee's rationale in terms. Oh, sorry. Hello. Oh, this is not directly an in-school issue. I just think that one of the charges that we have is to do everything to support the educational needs of kids. And unfortunately, in the society we live in, that means that sometimes we have to extend beyond the school building. And so I would be interested in going against the committee's recommendation, because I just think that as an association of school boards, as a school board ourselves, and an association of school boards, I think it's important for us to weigh in on broader societal issues that impact the education of our kids. And so I would be interested in going against the recommendation and actually voting to adopt that resolution.
Okay, so we've got anybody else wish to make a comment? And again, we're not voting this evening. This is just the beginning of our conversation, and we won't have a vote until next board meeting. Okay, so I guess oh, go ahead. All right, Donna.
So I guess a lot of the wording in number 2 is what we can't change. That's why I had issues with it. Like, I totally support the idea. I think that the problems that I had with it were some of the wording, and in particular, understanding that the reason that they have it at 14 is because that is the age that you can have a firearms owner identification card. So I am entirely supportive of this changing. I guess I'm not supportive of, or I don't know, like I'm still waffling. I waffled for a long time, but I guess my concern and my initial thoughts of not supporting were because of the wording of the resolution. Not that we're going to, as Kristen pointed out, support legislation around, support, how did you phrase that? They did it with the train crossings?
Oh, I think in the one with the train crossing, and you guys can find it. It's under the like something about government relations. Like it talks about local government relations or something like that, intergovernment relations, or so. It's under that area in current position statements. And I think the way that it's local, state, federal relations. So that's how it was. or that's the area where it was. And it was, the wording was something like it calls upon the state legislature as well as local local entities as well as the federal entities to work together to develop safe or accomplish safe crossing. I'm searching through this currently and I can't quite put my finger on the exact wording.
Okay, so I guess my thought on number 2 is that I'd like to have the administration's opinion on that one, and I'm going to withhold obviously we're not voting, but I'm going to withhold my judgment on that one because I was waffling for a long time and ended up on the side of, I love the idea, I'm just not sure that this is where it fits, so, but in addition, number 7, I would like to understand some of the discussion that went around this, because I didn't read it the way you did it, Aldo. I read it as, like if you look at the district rationale, it says during the most recent COVID-19 pandemic, the state had decision-making authority over pandemic closures. I read this as reversing that. So in other words, the direction given to us, like the challenges that were, the many entities that went after the governor and, sued for the right to have local control on that. I read this as a direct result of that, and not having the weigh-in of the state at the upper level in regards to a pandemic, which really is, I'm all about local control normally, but to me this seems like it is going beyond. I also feel like local control in something like a pandemic is something we need to be careful with, because I think the guidance from the state is super important. So that's how I read this. So and then when you spoke, I didn't hear you reading it the same way. So I guess we need to understand a little bit more the discussion behind this one.
Yeah, I have reservations about that one also. I'm worried that it would, say we do go into a situation where the metrics are going the wrong direction and the governor makes a choice, or, I worry that would then cause us to have a lot of boards saying that Iasb should be lobbying against that. So that would be one of my concerns about that. And again, it sounds as if there was quite a variety of opinions expressed. And again, there is already a local control statement for Iasb. They always advocate for this, but they themselves felt like this was important to pull out of that. And my read of that is because there's an overarching idea that might trump that in this case. And so I guess that would be my concern. Certainly, as has been done as we've gone through this, there has been a lot of local control. And, there has been a lot of decisions put to local schools and looking at their varying metrics. But in the event that we have a situation where there is another state-based decision that our governor feels is important, where would that place Iasb in terms of their positioning for that? So that would be a concern I would have. I was able to find the railroad crossings. It actually says, the Illinois Association of School Boards urges the Illinois General Assembly, the Congress of the United States, state and federal commerce commissions, and railroad industries to continue working toward the installation of adequate warning devices at all railroad crossings maintained in Illinois. What number is that? It's number 6.07 under local, state, federal relations. So I wish we could go to them and say, could you draft it like this? Because I feel like that puts the onus on everyone to continue working, makes clear our position, but doesn't put the whole, burden per se on Iasb. That's one concern I have in terms of, just looking at the kinds of things that they're going to be lobbying, just making sure that they're not overloaded and carrying the water. I also want to understand what kinds of opposition this has encountered to make sure that there's not impact on populations that we aren't aware of in terms of, it doesn't, though it talks about school shootings, it's not contained to that. So it is looking at any time there would be a firearm usage of someone. So who is that? And, I just want to make sure that we are aware of all of the kind of the populations that it will impact in terms of those parents, those family members, et cetera. Obviously, we want our schools to be safe, and I am 100% supportive of, ensuring that they are and doing everything that we can. And I think we've had lots of conversations through this IASB process in terms of that. But I do want to make sure that we really understand kind of the situation with this piece of legislation and, what ISB would be taking on if they're going to be the one that will be, having it as their priority. Additional thoughts from the board? Christine?
I'm very stuck on number 2. 7, I'm just gonna have to think about a little bit more, but I'm stuck on number 2 because, like, to Charles' point, schools we're not hermetically sealed from the outside world at any time. But given my own personal views and how the board has acted in the past couple years with some resolutions pertaining to guns, so I support the resolution there, but I'm stuck just wondering if this resolution just does need to be better worded and maybe a little bit more targeted in what it would be trying to accomplish. But then is there a way, and I don't know if you know this answer, this is something we just have to research a little bit more, where IASB can basically partner with other groups to advocate for this legislation. So, we kind of come together maybe like as a coalition for something like this, but not just specifically us advocating for it.
Yeah, and I don't know who's lobbying for this. I don't know the background or if there's any entity that takes responsibility for more safety type situations. Again, that was another question I asked that ISB could do a little research into. What kinds of I would put this in a public safety, so there's public safety types of campaigns. Did ISB take a positive position on kids wearing seatbelts? Did they take a positive position on legislation to have the DUI limit? Those are other areas that I could kind of think in my mind that's a similar type of public safety campaign where perhaps the past they did take a position in a situation like that and really work to advocate for something that would make things safer for kids. So that's one of the questions I asked is, kind of looking more at the history in the event that those were, campaigns that we did participate in. I think that makes it more clear that, yes, we have done that in the past. We have gone beyond the school walls and advocated for things that are outside of the school walls when it makes a difference for students. So I did ask for them to track that. That doesn't mean that we have to make our answer as a board contingent on that, but I just think it helps to lay the track record of what they have participated in the past that has to do with just overarching public safety concerns as opposed to just exactly that which is in the school. Donna.
Okay, so now as we're discussing, I'm leaning back to my original thought. So this is under legislative activity, which is directly tied to school. If it were reworded slightly and placed under local, state, and federal relations, because it's more of a, that's where I think it belongs. And so I think I'm going to go, I mean, obviously we're not voting, but I think I'm going to lean back towards my original thoughts of not adopting this because I think it's misplaced and misworded. Although I thoroughly support the idea, it doesn't belong where it is, so.
Janet.
On Resolution 7, when I read just the resolution part, I totally agree with Joe. It seems like, actually pretty innocuous. It's what we're doing right now. But then when you get to the rationale, it says the opposite, essentially. So maybe I'll just echo Donna's request, maybe we can find out how they intend to, lobby it, I guess.
Exactly. And who's lobbying in this space? I know that I did talk with some legislative experts about what they think is going to be before the General Assembly. So what other things ISB is going to be focused on a lot, and what other areas this may get into. And so there was some question about how this would, there's a lot of dialogue about, police reform and, those types of things, some of which will fall into schools in terms of looking at things like discipline disparities and other kinds of things, SROs, et cetera. But some of those overarching questions, this may fall into some of those areas when you look at, I know there was some dialogue about whether or not this would be, I think it's a misdemeanor, but there was some question about would it be a felony. And so then when you start looking at those kinds of things, it may fall into some of those overarching efforts that are ongoing in terms of looking at sentencing reform and some of those other areas. So I'd love to know if there is any part of it that would impact concerns in that area, as well as who are the players that are working towards this legislation, and would this be something where Iasb could be a part, but not necessarily the one, that was, in charge of everything, or if there would be some kind of coalition that they could be a part of. And I agree that it would be great if it had been drafted in the other way. I just know it can't be changed. So if we conclude that we don't like how it's drafted, then we would have to say, let's reach out to them, talk to them about next year rewarding it differently and having our support. As I have said, the vote was 20-2. So the fact is there are quite a few people that probably do have some degree of concern, not sure what exactly each person would have in their mind, but it may be that this doesn't come for a vote, doesn't gain the majority. But even us having this conversation about what ways that it could be drafted to gain support next time, I'm sure that the sponsoring district would be finding that helpful as they, consider, how to move forward on this. So let's maybe put this as we want to gain quite a bit more information about it. And we'll also gain other information about number 7. Were there any other ones that we wanted to take a look at and have the district look closer? I will say that school report card one was interesting. I did ask him if there had been any discussion about changing the date, because June 1 is the date that the school report cards are asked in this resolution to be ready by, which seems impossible. I can barely even look at Patrick to even think how it would be possible to have June 1 data for school report cards. I think now it's November 1. I did ask if there had been any discussion with them about, do you want to, put it in the middle, like August 1 or something like that, in terms of the idea of having that data before the school year begins. But the sponsoring district just didn't have any interest in changing that or making it more possible, and so it sounds as if that one might just die. But if it were to, if there were to be a challenge, I guess we'd have to discuss, is that something that we think is, meriting any kind of further consideration? Okay, so I don't see anyone else who is asking for additional information from the administration. We'll just go forward with getting as much information as we can about the ones that we've identified. All right, that will conclude our conversation on our discussion without action. Discussion with action. ISB resolutions delegate.
Great. So at the last Board of Education meeting, the board had a brief conversation regarding appointing a delegate. Normally, we would do this at the second meeting in October, concurrent with reviewing the resolutions. However, due to the virtual setting of this, we needed to get moving on that. The board informally agreed at that meeting to appoint Joe as its delegate, who authored the resolution, which was recommended to be adopted by the Resolutions Committee. Annually, we formally elect or appoint that person, so this is a formality of Joe being appointed as your delegate. So we'll need a motion and a...
I move approval of Joe being appointed our delegate.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Yangrohr.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Leong.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Do a great job representing us, Joe. We'll prepare you as best we can after we have all these conversations. Okay, moving on to item 10, old business. We have no old business. So we'll move on to item 11, new business, and we have no new business. So then we'll move to item 12, upcoming events.
Just a reminder for our community that Monday, October 12th is a staff remote planning day. So that's a change in the schedule. And the next Board of Education meeting will be October 19th, at which we will continue to update the board on our Stage 2 Return to Learn.
And can you just remind everyone why we don't have to change our calendar or make that day up at the end?
Yeah, once again, the Illinois State Board of Education has authorized districts to use up to 5 remote planning days that count as student attendance days.
Okay, so we won't be making that up. And I know that that will be great opportunities for professional learning. Okay, so then we get to item 13. Item 1301, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Ms. Patton.
Gerke,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Yangroor,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Leong.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are